Hey everybody, welcome back to Terminus, the view of extreme metal podcasts. I am the death metal guy, aka Quarthon Funko Pop.
And I'm the black metal guy, aka the David Lynch Miko Aspa collaborative LP you've all been waiting for.
I could actually see that being outstanding. I would like Miko Aspa to score a short David Lynch film.
Could you imagine the aneurysms that would cause at,
Oh, God. I can only imagine.
Oh my God, yeah.
Although, the Quarthon Funko Pop, I'm kind of amazed it hasn't happened yet. Yeah.
I'm amazed there hasn't been. I don't know if Quarthon. I think Quarthon's dad wouldn't sell his kid out like that, but
Yeah.
You know who would have a Funko Pop?
Nurgle.
Fenris,
Nurgle, Ison probably would. Alright.
What is a Funko Pop? I guessed on what it is, but what the fuck is it?
Those shitty fucking vinyl dolls that all look the same. They're like collectors for pop culture. Yeah.
No, see, I think Ison would think he's too good for it, but at this point probably isn't.
I said, there's that thing where you open your phone and it gives you like the recommended articles for you or whatever on Chrome. Mm-hmm. It gave me one of like Ison talks about like his 10 most influential albums. It's just like, it's just exactly what you fucking expect.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have so much respect for his early work that like I don't I guess, he's... Other people have aged worse. He's just sort of like an old prog rocker now.
Yeah, but God, there's nothing more disappointing to me than when guys get slow as they get old,
Sure, yeah, and he thinks he's developed as an artist, but he's lost... Yeah, I mean, he definitely stopped listening to black metal, you know what I mean?
Or
stopped listening to anything but the things he originally liked.
Oh, definitely. Well, and I always find that so weird that seems to happen with so many artists, because just like as I get older, I want more and more extreme stuff, Yeah,
I listen to more of the things that I'm like, great, there's more.
I don't even fucking want music anymore. I just want horrible noise collages.
Yeah, he's it's like the opposite. I think, the Swedish people, compare Trident to that, right? It's like I think the Swedes have done better on longevity, and in a couple of weeks, there's going to be a new Mork Gruning album, which, even if it's not good, will be still better than, like, hearing Ison's prog rock album or whatever.
Oh, definitely. Jesus Christ.
It's like at least Mork Gruning decided to reunite to Mork Gruning.
Yeah, as opposed to, featuring, Merker as, like, a guest vocalist or something.
Jesus. Man, I read a great headline a while ago, speaking of all this. I think this is in The Guardian, a highlight of modern metal journalism. Quote, there's a picture of Enslaved on the cover, and aggression, but also fragility. How Norwegian black metal grew up. New music by Olver, Enslaved, and Emperor frontman Ison is staying true to the scene's original cosmopolitan spirit while rejecting its murderous violence.
Fuck off, God. I don't even want to do the fucking show. You just ruined my day. Like, God damn it. Whatever. I can't even get into that without getting into like a rough.
Yeah, no, I think we can't. Yeah, I think that sort of that is its own joke. We don't need to elaborate.
Our rejection of it should speak for itself.
Yes.
All right, so top of the hour housekeeping. Like, comment, subscribe on whatever platform. Leave us a review. On Apple Podcasts, I guess that's the main place people review podcasts. We've done great on other categories, but we bottomed out at 6 reviews on Apple Podcasts. We need way more. Even if you don't like us, just
Throw us a hate review.
Just give us like a poop emoji 1-star review or something like that.
or if you feel perfectly lukewarm, 3 stars.
3 stars gun emoji. I don't know. Whatever kind of emoji review you want to leave. We are on social media. We've got me running the Facebook at Terminus Podcast, and the Black Metal guy running the Instagram at Terminus Extreme Metal. And additionally, if you really enjoy us, especially if you're a newcomer coming from Grizzly Butts, or were introduced to our Serpent Column interview a couple weeks ago, and you really enjoy what you're doing, feel free to throw us some money on Patreon or Subscribestar. $3 gets you all of our Terminus Prime bonus episodes, and $5 and up gets you access to the Terminus Black Circle, where we get drunk and talk about metalcore on Discord. So,
and we just uploaded a new Terminus Prime episode about Christian and Vader. However, we got our first ever YouTube copyright block. Not even because of Christian or Vader, but because of...
I love it. It's because we sampled a decapitated song. There's something perfect about it. That happened on an earlier episode. I sampled a little bit of Ill Disposed, and that got us blocked in Denmark or some shit.
Yeah. You just can't go near that kind of you can't go near that sort of late 90s, early 2000s core-ish death metal, right? It's that's just too lucrative. That's
just radioactive.
Yeah.
Although I do like that the copyright block...
Legal Squad springs into action to defend Spheres of Madness.
Yeah, I like how the copyright block didn't come from either of the cool bands we covered, but shitty Decapitated who have one decent song. All right, so records for today. We've got an all black metal spread. I finally didn't put on a Brutal Death album for the first time in a month and a half, so you guys can all listen to the whole episode. Now you don't have to skip a part. And I think you've got the opening too. So what have we got today?
Well, this was actually a recommendation from Grizzly Butts. So thanks, Grizzly Butts, for this good tip. He was like, "I'm not covering this one, but you guys might like it. Check it out." And I had seen it before on YouTube, but hadn't clicked on it, really. So this is Ildskaer's, I don't know how to say it, Den Raedsomste, which is out on Wolfspell Records, who have pretty prolific label right now. Ildskaer is Danish. They're part of the newly coalescing Danish black metal scene. I think until the last maybe 4 or 5 years, or more recently than that even, I think there would only really be a couple Danish black metal bands that I could think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, I've got a small handful.
Yeah, it's there was, what was it? There was one Blood something.
There was Blodarv, there was Bloodfest.
Yeah, Bloodfest is the one I'm thinking of.
And
they were
also
great, right?
Yeah, and there was also
eccentric.
Make a Change, Kill Yourself was from Denmark also. Mm-hmm. They have a decent kind of depressive scene.
Mm-hmm. Wait, was Bloodfest? There was one that had the guys in Bloodfest went on to form De Inquisitor, which is a very unique kind of immolation with Marduk blasts band.
That sounds kind of cool.
Oh, yeah, I like it a lot. Yeah, very unique. So Bloodfest was great, but sort of a thing on their own, to me at least, and then there were those you named. But recently there's been... Oh, shit, I should save this for the actual fucking review. I forgot we're at the beginning of the show. Oh, God, see, I'm really... Guys, I'm kind of sick today, so I might miss a few beats.
All right, well, what's the next record?
Cimetiere's Extinction. And Cimetiere is a Quebecois band who haven't put out a full length before. This is new. This is coming out on Follet Productions and Le Creations Underground, both CD, and then Epitaphe Productions is doing the tape. There's a very nice looking tape edition of this. I checked out the demo a while back, and I'm not sure I even finished listening through the whole thing. I was just like, well, this is good. I will buy it, and we will cover the full length. So,
Alrighty. And then for my side, went a little bit weird for me. We've got an independent release by a Vietnamese sort of prog black metal band called Elcrost. This is an EP called Foregone Fables. They released a full length earlier this year and then followed it up pretty quickly with this EP. You know, always interested in bands from, you know, areas that are kind of forgotten, and I don't think I can think of a Vietnamese band off the top of my head that I know, so I figured, hey, let's give it a try, see what they're doing over there.
Who is... wait, let me see. I think I actually can think of one. Let's see.
This is great content. This is great. Definitely. Hold on. Let's stop what we're doing.
No, Vothana.
Vothana?
Yeah, there you go. Okay. They're very popular right now. Although I think the guy's based in Minnesota now, but it's Vietnamese themed, and I think he's originally Vietnamese.
Oh, okay, I gotcha. Yeah. And then finally, our last record of the night, we have Toadeater's Bit to ewigen daogen, something like that. It's German. This is on Revolvermann Records and Kellerassell Records. I think I'm dimly familiar with Kellerassell, but I don't know Revolvermann.
Feel like I've seen that name, yeah.
Yeah. So, sort of just a modern black metal record being described and marketed as post-black, and I'm sure we're going to have a very interesting, very angry conversation about that.
We'll get to the post-black question. Which we've touched on before, maybe in episode 4, I think, when we talked about what were those bands? Those Polish bands.
Groza.
Groza and Eiffel 1710, yeah.
Yeah. And also when we were talking about Meslamtea a few episodes back. But let's get it rolling, man. Ildskaer. Den Raedsomste not. Something like that.
Okay, I guess now I'll say the things that I was going to say.
Go for it.
All right, so the Danish scene that's coalesced in the last few years centers around the Corpsand circle. They have a comp out. The band that I would say I associate most with it, which I'll sample later, is called Fanbearer. And there are a few others. Blot and Bod has put out a couple full lengths already, very quickly, I think on Iron Bonehead. Yeah, there are a number of other bands in this sort of black circle formation there, and what they are really influenced by, I mean, I think in some sense they're really influenced by American black metal, like sort of stompy punkish stuff, and also by the German stompy black metal sound. So mid-tempo, very raw, very punky, and with kind of epic riff patterns that are becoming pretty common these days. So there's so Ildskaer, though, comes from outside the Corpsand circle as far as I can tell. So this might be a good chance to see if we can isolate some characteristics of what a Danish sound is, if there is one yet. Yeah, I don't know. I sort of went back and forth on this record. I liked it very well first, and then I was like, there's some of these things I don't really like about this. And then I listened to it again this morning, and I was like, yeah, this is fucking great. So I went from like pretty good to like good but problems back to like, yeah, this is an excellent record. So
yeah, I mean, well, this is another one of those cases where it's you bringing a record that's like focus tested for me. We were talking about that with the Imha Tarakat record from probably, I don't know, like 6 weeks back or something, which you ended up not being as huge on, but for me was like, oh yeah, this is just regular rotation for me forever. You know?
Yeah, so I thought this was going to be an Imha Tarakat maybe, and then when I listened again today, I was like, no, I do really like this. By the way, Imha Tarakat, congrats to him. He got signed, I think, to Prophecy Productions, and they're putting out a full run of the album.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, it was too good for nobody to pick it up. That just wouldn't make any sense.
Oh yeah, that's bullshit. Yeah. So I'm glad he's doing well.
Yeah. So this record, I mean, it's interesting you're talking about kind of listening to, hearing these shades of kind of USBM and stompy German stuff, because honestly, the majority of this reads as Franco-Finnish to me. And we've kind of talked about this before, and I think I've brought up this question before, is that just what European melodic black metal sounds like now, or are we just really self-selecting? this style? Because, well, obviously, this whole paradigm of melodic black metal is more popular than it's ever been before. But is it just completely dominating? Is that just what melodic black metal, European black metal sounds like now? Or
the answer is yes. I mean, so I don't think this band has nearly as much of the sort of American or German influence in it, although you can hear it somewhat. So it's a good test for the Danish sound because it's outside that paradigm. But yeah, I mean, so I definitely hear the Franco-Finnish thing here, and what we mean by that, we use that term on a lot on this show. If you're new to the show, that means basically a riffing style that comes from, the melodic parts on Satanic Warmaster, from Sargeist, and maybe before that from Signor Valand. I think we've also found predecessors in Impaled Nazarene, and in, I guess last week you showed me that fucking Behemoth track from the first Behemoth record. But it's basically like budget epic guitar, using 2 or 3 strings to make these sliding melodies that sort of harmonize, and you're often playing these some kind of epic sounding heroic riff that's very harmonized Dorian minor scale.
But definitely maintaining the aggression, never letting the epic quality overtake the fact that it's music about riffs,
Well, I'd argue that some of the stuff does, right? The peril of the style is that it becomes really poppy, at least for me. But so this is, I think you're right, that it's become completely, I mean, we're almost dominant, we're at oversaturation point, I'd say. But at the same time, right, there's something, and so it's produced this music where, at the best, you get just this, sort of resolute, noble-sounding black metal that has this lush sense of melody that's uplifting, that evokes, heathen or medieval sentiments better than maybe some of the earlier attempts at those sounds.
Yeah.
The downside, you can get stuff that's very poppy, easily smooth, kind of homogenous.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of curious. So, what would be an example? Not to just be like, oh, let's shit on bands. What would be an example of a band that goes too far in that direction?
Well, I think Sargeist sometimes.
Okay, I got you.
I think the weaker Sargeist songs. Those what's that German one that the German Sargeist clone band that is fairly popular is a good example of this.
Oh God, I don't even know.
And often what I think it is that I'm very amenable to this style of riffing. It's just cool. So often it's just you'll hear a band executing it well, but then I'll just kind of ultimately be left not. I might even like it, but just wish there was some more bite to what was going on.
Well, yeah, you probably read it as kind of lacking depth, which I can understand.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, exactly. So I mean, my brain is especially slow today, so we're gonna come back. I'll see if I can come back with some good examples for that.
Oh, that's no problem. That was just an aside, anyway. Yeah.
No. I think it's a fair question, and I think that's a good question because I think it's hard. In some sense, there's something inherently cool about it. So it's hard to isolate bands that just really fuck it up.
Yeah. It's hard to fuck up. It's an established idea.
That's almost part of the problem. It lends itself to a certain kind of mediocrity.
Yeah,
and it can lend itself to a certain kind of smooth accomplishment or something. And it can really lend itself to a kind of writing that's highly based on hook riffs interspersed with filler. So let's go. I guess we should talk about this record, though. What I think Ildskaer is doing very well is starting to find a way of breaking out of this sound from within.
Yeah.
And I'd say one thing that has happened now that this technique is so dominant, I try to think this through. It's we associate the Franco-Finnish sound with Finnish and French black metal and with a couple moods, right? Mm-hmm. Basically, a couple certain moods. So it's really associated with a sound and a scene. But I think maybe what's happening now is this is becoming, it's so everywhere now that there are so many different takes on it that it's beginning to come like technology.
Yeah.
Instead of being a signature style, it's of a certain scene or sound, it's almost becoming like we're getting pretty close to the Finno-French thing is getting pretty close to like the melodic minor power chord riff, or the tritone blast riff, or blast beats.
Yeah, there's some sort of melodic character to this kind of thing that is, at this point, so well defined. It is an entity unto itself. There's a technique to be taught and to learn.
And you can write it in so many different ways. Because, like, I mean, a lot of French bands use this style of chording, but write far more developed melodies than you usually get with this stuff. Like Vehemence or Aurlach, who I love talking about. Yeah, and that's so different from bands that have a more deliberately minimal attempt to it. Like, you could say Gruntherd in the U.S. Just sounds like, at least their earlier stuff, just sounds like Signor Vaillant, right? Or you get these kinds of kind of interchangeable Finnish bands or German bands or whatever that have some good licks in them in this kind of poppy way. Yeah. Right? These are just very different things now. So I think what this band does is they find some new depth and some new weirdness in the way of doing this. I think we should just play your sample.
Yeah, no, actually, because that, I think, does show... Because that's what impressed me about this band, is the fact that they're taking this very conventional style, and they are adding that kind of substantial depth to it. So this is off E-Corpset's Raker. I'm guessing that's how you pronounce it.
That sounds good.
So I'll just listen to the opening couple minutes of this, and I'll talk about some of the things that intrigued me about this record. So that's obviously great, right?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal riff.
Yeah, and what I really appreciate is that it's a fucking long riff, and I've noticed it feels, everything comes in waves. It's like we start talking to, we cover that Into Oblivion record, which has these really long involved riffs. Then we get to, Encephalic doing really long involved brutal death riffs, and now we've got the same thing happening with Ildskaer, so it's probably coincidence, but I like to imagine the idea, maybe we're advancing, maybe we're trying to do
There's no such thing as coincidence, right? It's like different processes, like there are deep structural processes that are playing out at somewhat different rates and in different ways in different genres. And, Into Oblivion and this band, in some sense, that really reminds me in some sense of an Into Oblivion riff. Not just because the riff itself is long, because you could shorten all those notes, right? These are like whole note melodies.
Yeah.
And that's what Into Oblivion stretches in that way. They're whole note melodies that shift in interesting places here.
Yeah, they never end in the place you expect them to.
There's like maybe 4 or 5 different sections of it, and each is harmonized a little bit differently, which is really cool. There's really active rhythm guitar in this, or second guitar, which sets it apart from a lot of this Finno-French stuff, where the second guitar is usually just a power chord.
Yeah.
And a power chord in an uninteresting position.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of space between the two parts.
Yeah, no, there is. It's very involved, and that's the kind of thing. It's like we were saying with Into Oblivion. It's fucking hard to write. You can't phone it in, which is probably one of the issues with a lot of the Franco-Finnish stuff. Is at this point the technique is understood well enough. I can rip out a Finnish black metal song in 2 hours just because I
sent you. I sent you one. I remember I sent you one a couple of years ago where you told me it sounded more like fucking Judas Iscariot or whatever.
Yeah,
but like you were surprised that I'd improvised it. I was jamming, right? It was just 2 riffs, and it's just like, yeah, you can just play them.
Yeah. I mean, like once you know the guitar technique, you can just like kick the shit out really easily. But what was interesting is while we were playing...
Speaking of which, I remembered one of those bands. Sorry to pick on them. They're not, like, bad, right?
Yeah.
But Sarkrista, right?
Sarkrista. I know the name. I don't think I've ever listened to it.
Serviceable, highly consonant, epic-sounding block chords played by Germans instead of Finns,
I'd probably love
it's also like, they're just... What?
I'd probably love it.
Exactly, right? I mean, and it's fine to have an appetite for this stuff. Like, there are a lot of solid Finnish bands that will have, like, a couple really good riffs per album, and then the rest of it's kind of that,
Well, it was... one thing I wanted to bring up, when we were listening to that sample, they got to that second riff, that arpeggiated one, and you're like, yeah, it's a good riff. I mean, it's kind of like a placeholder while you get to the next place. But then, I kind of want to say, well, maybe Franco-Finnish stuff needs more of that. Maybe everything doesn't... Maybe we need that dynamic. Everything can't just be these bright, massive riffs. We need... I thought that was something that you might actually appreciate, is like, let's not go 110% the whole time. Pull it back periodically and, create more contrast.
Oh, I agree that contrast... Sure, no, I agree that contrast is good. The reason I feel things like that are placeholders is they're just not well constructed. I mean, that has a... that's not the most... So the thing that I would find about this record is that... The thing that when I listened to it the second time, the thing that struck me is there's a massive gap between the A riffs and the B riffs. And if the B riffs are kind of phoned in... then the album starts to work like rock music, so it targets the songs around the A riffs, right?
Yeah,
and that's the thing that the Anus guys hate about all Finn. Why is my voice doing that today? That's the thing that the Anus guys hate about all Finn Black, which I don't think is fair at all, right? Or but like is you could. Yes, there's a drawback to it all being this smoothly flowing stuff, but there's also a way of writing where you've got kind of parts that are just there. That I like, contrast good, variation good, darker melodies good. I like even the form of that melody. I think the switch there is cool. I think it's just got kind of a set pattern. I think there are... I'll show you. Here's my next sample.
Okay.
So, unless you've got something more you want to say about that.
No, go ahead.
Because I think this is a really good record. I think basically it has this residue of the kind of big hook riff, filler riff thing that characterizes this style, but it's working to get past it. But here's an example of it right at the beginning of the record. First track.
Okay.
This is on Raedsomste. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure our listeners can pick up which is the A riff and which is the B riff there.
No, yeah, that's right? I mean, that's one of the more glaring examples of it. Definitely.
Yes, and it's the second riff in the record. So it's like, you know, it doesn't, what this band, I think what they do very skillfully is that the first couple tracks work more like this. And then by the time they get to 3, that one you sampled from, that one has gorgeous development throughout it, basically. And I feel like the songs that hang together more as wholes are all on the back end of the record, whereas they put their this is a kind of a smart move. It's like, okay, we have a couple tracks that work more like this kind of rock format. Let's put them at the beginning, because if you hear those big hooks, you're going to stick around. And I did, right? I heard the first riff, and then I was like, I heard the second, and I was like, oh, God. But I wasn't like, this band is bad. I was like, let's see where they go.
Oh, come on with the, oh, God.
It's true.
Jesus Christ, it's not that bad.
I'm a big believer in solid rhythm guitar riffing, right? And in, like, trying to make every riff count, right? So it's like, I mean, that is, like, I'm not, even that idea, right, that basic idea, okay, we go down a fifth, we play something that has a bit more of a melancholy feel, we build tension. That's a convention, that's built into this style. That's not necessarily a bad move in itself, but what I want to hear then is a riff that has its own distinct form.
Okay, I can understand that.
You know how we talked with, I was trying to think about how to explain this, because I'm such a stickler about this shit, so this is what I mean, like, we were talking with Oldowan, right?
Yeah.
Or wait, actually, you quoted Oldowan when we were talking with Serpent Column about the idea that riffs need to be unearthed. Yeah, so the way I kind of feel like is like, if the riff could be written in a ton of other ways and it wouldn't meaningfully change it much, you haven't unearthed a riff. You've just got a type of riff.
Oh, I get that. I get what you mean there.
So it's like, that's it. You know, and again, it's not a bad riff, it's just, you know, it's just kind of there. And that's one of the most egregious examples on this record, and now I'm going to stop being a dick. But the point is that it, like, I think what it's actually doing, it's a kind of remnant of the chrysalis of this kind of troped Finno-Frankish style, and they're trying to break out of it, and they do it very successfully over the course of the record.
Yeah, they do. But, well, let me get another sample in there, and, you know, I'll talk about, I'll pull the camera back a little bit, I'll talk about my feelings about this, you know, the style and what this album is doing particularly well for it. So this is off Matrosen, so let's just give that one a shot.
Yeah, so I was just saying that last riff is pretty cool. I like that transition.
Oh yeah, no, I mean this is another record that's hard to sample because on a certain level, this is one of those records where my review of it it's a Rorschach test for what you like, because it's like it really is kind of a riff slideshow album of like, here's a cool French riff, here's a cool Finnish riff, here's one that sounds a little more Ukrainian, but now we're back to the French. It's like an instructional manual on how to develop this style of music. And honestly, at this point in my life, I'm totally fine with that. I like it's like listening to the best product of your buddies in your local black metal scene. There's a simplicity to it that I appreciate. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, if I was going to criticize something, yeah, it's kind of blocky music. It's like for this, for that. There's not usually a ton of surprises in it. But I don't even know if that's necessarily a problem.
There's not a huge amount of continuity from melody to melody. But I do think they do a much better job of variation and development than a lot of bands that have that sort of have that drawback.
Yeah, no, this is definitely, craftsman's music of the highest order. These are guys who have a great intellectual and intuitive understanding of these sorts of melodies and how these songs should progress in a very, like, immediately gratifying way. And, yeah, I mean, I feel like this is almost a rehash of us talking about Imha Tarakat, really. I think. Yeah,
except I like this one a lot better.
Yeah,
there were things on the Imha Tarakat that I felt I could not condone. And there were some really, really strong songs on it, so I think I overall want to approve that album and support that artist. I think it's a cool band, but there are some parts on this that I'd like them to improve on, but I'll probably listen to this again.
Yeah, I get you. Oh no, this is going to become, this will sound backhanded, but this is an album I would just throw on whenever.
Well, I think this is good. I think this is very good. Well, for me, yeah, I do. You do a lot of driving. I do a lot of walking.
Mm-hmm.
For me, this is good walking around in the autumn music. I think this would be very good for that.
Yeah, this is great. I'm just hanging out, It's like I got my phone open. I got some bullshit drive I have to make. It's like, fuck it, that Ildskaer record's always good. You put it on, you're always going to have a good time with it, so just go for it.
Let's talk about that, the beginning of that passage, right? We both really liked. What do you... Yeah.
Well, it's just this very elemental riffcraft. I mean, that's like, if you're going to talk about a Franco-Finnish riff in the terms that we describe it, you would play something like that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, well,
it's definitive.
The one that comes in after the blast, or the ones right before it?
I think the opening of that passage, the solo guitar part.
Yeah, and so that part, right, we were saying there's a pretty cool head fake there.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of interesting structural ideas, that's something they could do more of. It's like they play this, extremely epic sounding Finno-French thing that could even be maybe a Migla riff, right? And you think like, oh shit, we're gonna get like they're gonna blast that out, and then they drop to a completely different riff, although it has a relationship to the one before.
Yeah,
that is cool. And the way this song could be even better is if they brought back that super epic wind-up riff as a main riff at the end of the song.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, that would really release it.
Yeah, for the most part, it's not an album that thrives off surprise.
That's what I mean. So yeah, right there's a big surprise. Yeah, I think for me the main surprise of this record is just the first riff. I was like, well, that's a way to open the record. Shit.
Oh yeah,
just how it sort of comes out. It's a very successful attempt at starting on the climax and not really de-escalating just enough to make an album.
Fundamentally, the best part of this record is just how intuitive it is.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense from first to last, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to some of the stylistic stuff. So, I agree that you definitely hear a lot of different kinds of underground BM riffs that are kind of related. In that sense, I guess it's a little like the Oppressive Descent we talked about earlier this year.
Yeah.
and that there are people who are very tuned in to the different micro scenes that have developed in the last 2 decades, and they're trying to pull them together.
Yeah.
But I think they're doing a pretty good job already of finding common threads and putting their own unifying take on it all. And I think one thing that is kind of unique here is that I think we heard it some in that sample, is that there are these big kind of resolute, heroic, maybe triumphant sounding melodies, and then there's this more kind of mournful sounding melodies.
Yeah, which I think probably has to do with the theme of the record.
Yes, which we can talk about at the end if we get to it. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
that's a. But those really sound like vampiric French.
Yeah.
Which is a different thing from like the Seigneur Volant style.
Yeah, it's closer to like the Salfra stuff we were talking about.
Yeah, or to like Celestia, or any one of these kind of melancholy, almost depressive French piano.
Any Tears of a Melancholic Vampire stuff,
Yeah. So, and I think that affects their tone. It's got a cool guitar tone. It's got this kind of highly resonant, kind of boxy sound.
Very woody, I would say.
Yeah, very woody, very organic. The only record I've heard recently with a sound kind of like that is the Ephernach that came out last fall.
Yeah.
And I think, I guess, so let's try to think stylistically about what would be Danish about this then. And I think those kinds of the big epic riffs, to me, I think do sound kind of distinctively Danish. And it's the Danish scene, I think, very much uses this Finno-French style,
mm-hmm.
but in their own way that emphasizes the most it's not flamboyant, it's not melancholic, right? In that sense, it contrasts with the vampiric stuff. It's
more muted in general.
Well,
a little bit more down to earth.
Very, very earthy and very manly. So let's go with here's an example from Fanbearer. This is from Hand till Jord. This is, I think, this album's got a couple. It's solid all the way through, good walking music, but it's also got a couple real bangers. So this is from the main riff of the title track.
That's really cool. It's like we were saying when I listened to it, it's like, oh, this is what absurd is supposed to sound like, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what whenever people describe absurd, that's the sort of thing I hear in my head. Mm-hmm. But then I listen to actual absurd and it sucks.
I think the later absurd is somewhat different and maybe a little more accomplished, but I haven't listened to much of it.
I actually, there was a point. I think it was like 6 months ago, I was like, okay, I'm going to try and figure this shit out. And I listened to pieces off, like, all the major releases, and I was like, no, this fucking sucks, all of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's, but yeah, so this is, so what's interesting about it is it's got, like, so it's like absurd. It's definitely like Ildskaer, which is a band we'll come back to on the next one. But, unlike those bands, it's not so much, those bands are kind of extremely aggro. And also, like, Ildskaer has this undertone of melancholy, right?
Oh, Ildskaer has some, like, straight-up DSBM tracks.
Yeah,
those
DSBM,
are some of my favorites.
as far as you comparing things to emo, that's a thing where I'll just be like, yes, this really sounds like emo. In certain parts. So sort of Bill Skriniar has this mood of crisis, you could say, where it's like at once extraordinarily aggressive and hateful, and also just like sort of sad,
Yeah.
And this is just very solid.
Yeah.
The Danish sound just has its feet firmly under it. It's centered. It's just sort of like earthy, It's sort of stocky and manly.
It's good for chopping wood too.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Or you're just trudging around with a big pack on your back, and you're just like going through the woods. You just sort of nod to a bear, nod to a wolf.
Lumberjack black metal.
Yeah. So so you can hear a relationship between that and the big epic riffs on this record, I think. Mm-hmm. As far as a different take, I don't have that much to say about this, except while we were listening to another riff earlier, you mentioned it sounds like Gorgoroth.
Yeah, that's something it's subtle, but there's a lot of like Antichrist Gorgoroth on this record, I think. Which I think is a band that everyone loves Gorgoroth.
Is amazing.
Yeah, no, I mean, Gorgoroth is amazing. Everyone loves Gorgoroth, but I don't think people have a full appreciation of how influential Infernus's guitar technique might actually have been.
I think he's the most influential second wave guitarist.
Yeah, I think that's crucial.
I think if you want the root of the Finno-French sound, it's in Gorgoroth, no question.
Yeah, I think that might be true, but I think the issue is,
you could find precedent for it in Eternus. You could find riffs that sound like that in Obtained Enslavement in 94. Mm-hmm. You could find riffs that are like the most heathen, savage kind of Finnish stuff in Trelldom. But Gorgoroth, really, I think.
But I guess the problem is that Gorgoroth, it's hard to say this is a Gorgoroth riff, because honestly, Infernus had a very dynamic kind of far-reaching guitar style. He did a lot of different stuff, and he worked in a lot of moods, which almost worked against their legacy, because you can't pin it down to one thing. But I think there's a lot of Gorgoroth in this album's DNA.
And I think that's one way of passing outside the troped and homogenized quality of the Finno-French thing, is let's return to its roots and reclaim some of that range.
Yeah, and plus, the French have been taken from Gorgoroth. Look at old Deathspell Omega. Infernal Battles. Infernal Battles is a fucking Gorgoroth album.
Well, we will return to that shortly, bud.
We will.
So no, like right now, because you say you can't point to something and say that is a Gorgoroth riff. Here we go.
All right.
This is from the end of Forteret auf Ilden.
All right, let's give it a shot. Yeah, no, that's Gorgoroth. That's all that's all fucking Gorgoroth.
Yeah, so that's a quote of... That last one is a quote of possibly my all-time favorite riff, which is the riff to Krieg off of Under the Sign of Hell.
And it's... And it's interesting...
Sorry, I just wanted to on that one.
Well, it's interesting mentally tying those together, because then re-listening to that, going back, thinking about the Krieg riff, it's like, oh, so that's Sargeist. Before Sargeist. That whole sort of neo-romantic vibe is everything that Sargeist built off.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. Like, it's not as obvious on Let the Devil In or whatever, because it gets that more chorded sound. But I was going to say, literally on the first Sargeist record, which one is that one? It's got the...
It's not Satanic Black Devotion. It's the... because that's the second one.
Well, maybe it is Satanic Black... let's...
Oh, it is Satanic Black Devotion, you're right.
Yeah, so on Satanic Black Devotion, there's a riff that literally quotes that, almost too much for me. On Infernal Battles, or actually maybe the one after it, is it Inquisitors of Satan? On one of the earliest Gorgoroth records, there's a riff that closely sort of, or sorry, not Gorgoroth, DSO, see, dead brain. One of the earliest, yeah, there's a respectful quotation of Krieg on one of the earliest Gorgoroth records too, and so it's cool that this band taps into that and doesn't totally rip the riff off. And also, I just want to point out a thing that is very Gorgoroth about all that also, and that these sort of stompy lo-fi black metal bands don't do usually.
Yeah,
is all the absurd double bass under that.
Oh yeah, I think the kind of agitated drum performance on this record is, we didn't really touch on it, but it's a cool thing. Like, he's going into, instead of kind of, gently sliding in from the solo guitar passage to the blast beat, it's like, no, fuck it, giant snare roll. I'm here. I'm ready to fuck.
Yeah. If anything, they should turn up the drums, and especially the bass drum.
Yeah, I think
I didn't notice the double bass on this record. I listened to it 3 times. I didn't notice till I just re-listened to that before the show.
I think they could afford... I think this is music that would actually benefit from a slightly more polished production. Just give it a little bit more contrast and color. Just punch it up a little bit.
Yeah, keep the ringing... Yeah, keep the sort of almost clean ringing guitar tone. I really like that. Keep the boxy sound, but that would sound good loud.
Yeah,
right? That would sound good being beefy.
This is a record you have to turn up a lot for the full effect, I think.
That's true. There's a huge difference between, I really need to get some laptop speakers, because hearing it on the laptop versus on your headphones is totally different. It's very rich sonically, I'd say.
Yeah, it's got a lot of nice tone color and everything. I think that if they pushed it towards, Let the Devil In kind of sound quality, then the stuff would shine just that little bit more. It's giving it the production it deserves.
Yeah, so any summary comments?
I mean, honestly, I really like this fucking record, man. This is going to become a regular player for me, And honestly, I like these kind of craftsman's records, honestly, that's the kind of music that I probably listen to in my day-to-day life more than huge revelatory stuff. You know what I mean? And that's that's the thing I always try to reiterate. That's not saying that this is lesser. It's different. It has a different context. I mean, you had back in the day, you had music for the church, and then you had music in your street festival, and this is street festival music. If I want,
I think that's a very good distinction.
Yeah,
I think that
music for your life or music for revelatory moments.
Yes,
and life involves both.
Yeah, Serpent Column is the former. Probably Into Oblivion is the former. Although you could also listen to it more casually.
Yeah.
So like Ruins of Beverast, the former. The original second wave bands, the former. But what so much of the main body of this genre is, it's like folk music.
Yeah.
It really is a new way of playing electric folk music in the simplest sense of the word, even if it doesn't sound folky at all.
No, yeah, this is it's beautiful but unpretentious, which I think is sort of the best thing that black metal can be.
Yeah, and you get those little flashes of the religious moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Like that riff on the third track, man. Holy shit.
Yeah, that's a fucking big one. But
you know, and this album also has that nice quality, that sort of southern North Sea quality that you get with the Dutch too, of like a lot of cool little riffs where the sun will come out from behind a cloud.
Yeah,
and then you'll get some clouds and some storm wind again.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I think we really like this one, and definitely, and I mean, talk about a fucking opening album for a new band, you know.
Yeah.
It really shows a maturity that I'm really looking forward to the next stuff these guys do. So, with that, let's take a quick break and we'll talk about some other stuff.
This is Old One Gash, and you're listening to Terminus.
All right, next up, Cimetiere, Extinction. So, have you heard any of these, any of the old records by these guys? It looks like this is their third one.
Yeah. So they have older full lengths.
That's what I got at Metal Archives.
Oh, maybe this is what I get for using Bandcamp too much.
Memoir Ancestralis and Just Humanization.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, you're right. I just totally forgot. So good you checked that. No, I have not heard those. I heard La Grande Bataille is the demo, and I think I did not. Yeah, I guess I did not go back and check out Deshumanization. Yeah. So it's interesting that we didn't know about this at all, which means it's very, very Quebecois.
Yeah, which is, I mean, the whole Quebec. There's this whole Quebec black punk thing, and it's hyper insular. The members of the bands are usually fucking assholes.
Do you have personal experience in this regard?
I've had some personal experience with those guys. Just the usual shit is like if you try to reach out to them, they will not speak English with you. Like, even if they know English, they just won't do it on principle, that sort of thing. Like, all your stereotypes of French Canadians, basically. But the thing is, so I've been dipping in and out of that scene for years. There's a lot of good Quebec black metal, but the black punk stuff, which I think that you would agree, this falls into that, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I've been dipping in and out for a bunch of years, and it's just never fucking worked for me. Like, it never hit in the way that other people talk about. You know, like, I mean, God, do you remember the whole period while we were coming up and Akitsa was everyone's favorite guy band? You know, and Akitsa is like, I respect them, but I just never got into it. Until now.
We didn't like... We bonded over not liking Akitsa. Like, that's another band that, based on the things I like, I tried so much, you know? Like, and just, even when I gave it a good go, it's like, no. Or I'd hear a cool riff, and then I'd be like, so why did they do that weird, annoying arty part on the end of it?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, they would take good ideas and deliberately mess them up to make them sound more cool.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, so I agree. Quebecois black metal, you know, Toadeater has had this undeniably, like, good influence on the North American scene.
Yeah.
But I think both of us have had a hard time getting into a lot of the bands from that scene. And then on the other side of the spectrum, from Akitsa, you've got things like Fortress, which are, you know, to me, like, the nadir of hyper-melodic black metal.
I don't mind. I'm not super into it, but I don't mind it. But they've also done some pretty cool stuff like Brum Diatom and stuff in that same kind of vein. So anyway, I never liked this Quebec punk black shit until this record. This is the one that actually executes its promises. You know what I mean?
Like, oh, sure, yeah. As soon as I heard it, I was just like, yeah, well, this is great. Okay, cool. Yes, good.
I did not expect to like this nearly as much as I did, but god damn, this is a good record.
Yeah, this is one of those records where we both had basically the same thought on it. So, like, the formula is just like, what if you took those stompy black punk beats and you put, like, proper French-style black metal riffing over them?
Yeah, that's the great advancement in Quebec punk black technology is, what if we put actual riffs over this music, and they were good, and they had melodies and stuff?
Well, you know, it's like, And the interesting thing is, I think the end result doesn't even sound that French. Like, it certainly sounds like it's certainly the Franco-Finnish riff technique. Like, this band in particular is two strings. Yeah. Most of it, right? 2 strings and lots of minor sixths, lots of whatever. But it's definitely that technique, but the mood that comes out is, I think, distinctly Quebecois sounding and North American sounding. It doesn't really sound like, oh, you just put some stompy drums under a Seigneur Voland song.
No, there's definitely a distinct quality to this scene of just like kind of like gritty and dirty and pissed off and punk, but kind of heathen at the same time, kind of depressive at the same time.
The kind of depressive thing, I think, is important. That was a good point.
Yeah, no, I mean...
So why don't we start with your...
There's all kinds of DSP. I'm all over this kind of stuff. Usually the best stuff involves a lot of it, which this does. So yeah, let's listen to my first sample. It's literally just the opening of the album. First song, Aveugle? Or, I don't know, you've got the better French pronunciation.
Aveugle? I don't know. Aveugle? Aveugle? I guess there's an accent aigu on the last thing, so Aveugle? It's been fucking years.
Yeah, but, well, you handle, like, French pronunciation, and I handle, like, Eastern European stuff better. All right, so let's just listen to the opening. Right, so I mean that's a whole album, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah. It's and I mean we both knew it was good before the drums even kicked in.
Yeah, like the first 5 seconds I was like, "Oh, this is fucking killer. I love this." It's so I guess this is one of those rare cases where it's like it's so fucking affected that it actually works. It's like, dude, these guys totally know what they're doing. They're totally playing into this idea of these, like, pissed off black punk fucking Frenchman drinking his flask on the street outside the venue. He paid for the ticket but never saw any of the bands. He just wanted to talk shit outside.
Well, you know what? They're doing what we do as they're doing what we do as podcasters. They're making themselves into characters. Oh, right? Dude, it's honest. It's sort of, yeah, there's a kind of, I see what you mean, there's a kind of second-ordered thing, like, let's be the most Quebecois black punk band ever, but, like, you know, it's like, yeah, they sort of just, like, stage what they are.
Yeah, you know? and it fucking works because they're actually writing good music. They're actually killer riffs. I mean, they're as fucking stripped down as you can within this sort of melodic style. without turning it into something else, but holy shit, they work. And honestly, this is a case where it's like the kind of sloppy playing and the really raw garagey production, total assets to this record.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed.
Honestly, it's very hard to articulate what this album does that makes it so much better than any of their contemporaries, but it's immediate.
As frustrating as it is, I wish I could figure this out, but part of it is sometimes just like other bands write those kinds of troped riffs or whatever, and in this style, and they can sound sort of cool. This band has an ear. They they have an ear for melodies, even if the phrase is just 3 notes. I
think part of it is they're digging out those like deeply melodic aspects of early punk. You know, I think that they understand punk as like actual music rather than an aesthetic and an affect. You know, it's like, you know, I mean, there's certain melodic phrases on this record that are probably taken directly from early Ramones or something like that,
really?
But kind of twisted into this form. Yeah, like, I mean...
I don't hear that at all. Where?
I mean, take that little arpeggiated part right there. That could be a rearrangement of the arpeggiated riff on Pet Cimetiere.
Which one? Oh, God, yeah, but Pet Cimetiere is like... Which one? You mean the one at the... Do you mean like the... Maybe I didn't even notice that one. Was that... Where did that fall in the stream of riffs?
Just that dun 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 dun, that little depressive arpeggiated number.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, that does sound kind of like Pet Cimetiere. It's weird. I don't even associate Pet Cimetiere with the Ramones because it's so late.
Oh yeah, yeah. I really love that song. So.
Oh, I think that's their best song, but I think it like just sounds like the Misfits. It's.
Well, I'm a big Ramones guy. I know that you don't really like them at all, but.
I'd probably like them more now in some sense. They were in some sense the least punk of the early punk bands, but
I get that.
But also like now I look back on a lot of those early punk bands as pretty silly, right?
I mean, I not to get off topic, I read the Ramones as much more in continuity with the Beach Boys than like the Sex Pistols or something.
Oh, I think a lot of people do. Yeah. But, the Sex Pistols also got shut on a lot, and they're also the best one of those early bands.
No, yeah, Sex Pistols are great, but anyway.
Yeah, I hear what you mean. Yeah, there's this, like, sense of punk melody, and I really like those hammer-on riffs, the sort of, like, down, 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 down. Those are, and just on those 2 strings, and sometimes it's peeling back the extra chording that lesser bands use to hide the fact that they're just playing these kinds of sets of troped chords.
Yeah.
And directing it to, like, you get more of that cutting edge. You said something smart in your note. You said, what did you say? You said something about, like, the... Was that on this? No, that's on the record towards the end, actually. I think it's you talking about the Toadeater, but you talk about a rougher or sharper sense of melody.
Yeah.
And I think here there's a rougher or sharper sense of melody than on, say, your average Sargeist clone.
Oh, no, definitely. And I can also say there's a version of this record in an alternate universe that's fucking terrible. Sure. Like, I think in most parallel universes it's terrible. Mm-hmm. We're fortunately in the right timeline for this one to be a great record.
The hammer-on thing also has that kind of, like, uniquely North American banjo-y, mountainy ruggedness, right? And, it sounds, and that kind of pentatonic feel to it, which again is a little different from the French thing. And so a lot of what this feels like, this reminds me very much of Mortem. And I think Mortem themselves reminded me a little bit of Quebecois black metal, at least this
Yeah, I get that. Well, I mean, there's this whole through line of North American influences from Appalachian folk music to early rock and roll into the early U.S. punk stuff.
Oh, yeah, the early rock and roll thing. That's, the hammer-on thing does, I'm pounding on the table because you're right. The hammer-on thing does relate to the Ramones rhythmically, because that's a cool thing that the Ramones had, was that they took that Chuck Berry kind of...
Yeah, Chuck Berry and old doo-wop and stuff. Yeah.
The hammer-on thing is an answer to the sort of the black rockisms of the Bo Diddley riff or the Chuck Berry riff. Yeah, that makes sense. It's a parallel.
I mean, it's the same thing that you see with with the Misfits, I mean, and all their worship of, like, old doo-wop and early rock and roll, like, 50s era rock and roll. These are all ideas that are feeding into each other, and I think this is a case where it's people who...
Oh, yeah, it's Where Eagles Dare, right? Yeah. Okay, dude, so in some sense, like, you have the blues scale passing tone in the rock and roll riff, and that's used in the Ramones...
Yeah.
That's in the Ramones, that's in the Sex Pistols for sure. And then, like, the Misfits or whatever, and maybe later Ramones, right? They crank that down to a full step. And it gives it a more Dorian feel.
And then that's how you get to Motorhead,
Oh, Motorhead does that for sure, yeah. About the same time. Yeah.
So I think what we're seeing on this record is guys who actually understand that shit. They've actually traced the lineage. It's like we always talk about it. It's like, go back to the original. Go get your favorite band, listen to what they were listening to, and adopt that if you want to sound like them. I think that's what these guys are doing. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because when I hear those hammer-on riffs, I also think of, like, ancient European folk, some kind of semi-imaginary idea of what music sounded like when, people were just out on the steppes sawing the primitive stringed instruments. And I think that's a part of it, but in some sense you're getting there through American rock and roll and this sort of, like, American primitive tradition that's in both the the blues tradition and bluegrass here, right?
Yeah.
And country. Cool. Well, I think we just figured something out. I thank you for pushing me. Thank you for pushing me on the Ramones.
No, I've always found that the most interesting parts of punk are the ones that sound the most like Appalachian folk, I think. So, anyway, let's get to another sample. What do you got?
Fuck, man. Yeah, that's, Galaxy Brain. Okay. So, let's go to Vengeance, and this is just, you could pick any part of this record and I'd just be like, yeah, that's the part I like. But I think this is a part that particularly stood out to me. You'll notice there's another stompy part at the beginning, and another thing it parallels a lot is Fahnbearer, a Danish band, who also they have a different melodic quality. It doesn't sound as sharp or biting as this, but it's similarly, like, deeply minimal version of the Franco-Finnish thing.
Yeah.
All right. What stood out to you there in that last bit?
Obviously the blast beat is...
Yes.
The blast beat parts on this record are kind of the most unusual things.
I love
for this style. I think they're a little weird. I think if I listened to the record more, they wouldn't be quite as jarring to me. I do get a little bit of that jarring quality because so much of this record hangs out in that kind of, like, glum sort of lower mid-paced. But I think it's cool. The riffs are great when they're doing them, so there you go.
Yeah, well, I think it's maybe a case of variation that might be necessary given how minimal the rest of it is. But I think what's unique about it, maybe if they developed it a little more, it would come less as like, oh shit, they're blasting now, right? Maybe if they did it more.
But then if they developed it more, you start getting away from the sort of stark minimalism, which really
I just mean did it more.
Okay, yeah, I got you.
But like, yeah. So what they're doing, it's basically grinds, right?
Yeah.
And so what's interesting is there's really sloppy playing here, but I think that's mostly just because they decided not to give a fuck when they played.
Oh yeah, they're probably drunk. You know,
they're probably drunk, and I don't think they're not like pretending to be bad.
Yeah.
They're neither bad nor pretending to be bad, and they're capable of playing very fast, not necessarily perfectly in time, but that gives it that kind of compressive, grinding, frantic effect that once people mastered the blast beat has almost dropped out.
Yeah.
And that's another way that this record gets outside that sort of too easy smoothness of some music that sounds sort of like this.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, the ragged quality of this music is half the appeal.
Oh yeah, and then when it goes like it decelerates like to like quarter time, and it's kind of like bopping folk breakdown. I'm like, yes.
I mean, I think I know that it's nothing. It's a totally pointless connection to make, but this is another case where it's like, oh, this is what I always thought Ildskaer was supposed to sound like, you know?
Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah. Oh, well, yes. I had that thought more generally, that like, in some sense, if this band if there's a sort of limitation, it's not even a limitation to this band, if there's something unfortunate for this band, it's that people will think they've heard this before.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I think what's happened is that for the last decade, a bunch of underground BM has been orbiting around this specific style, this specific sound, as it appears on this record, and nobody's actually done it. So, like, in terms of what does this really sound like, well, it sounds like some of the rawest, most oi parts of Ildskaer, especially the last Ildskaer, especially with that kind of depressive glum sound.
It sounds a little bit like, also from Quebec, like the first Malveillance record. Malveillance.
Oh yeah, I haven't heard the first one, but Malveillance fucking kills.
Yeah, the first one is much more kind of depressive. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like he got into the later stuff that got a lot more crusty and aggressive, but the first one's just like fucking morose and shitty, and I like it a lot.
yeah, the D-Beat one is one of the first really ugly records I ever got, and it's probably still one of the ugliest records I've ever
What's
heard.
That, Just Fuck Off?
Just Fuck Off.
Yeah, that's a good record. I can only put that one on, you know, a couple times a year, but it does hit the spot when I need it to.
Oh, that takes... It's funny, yeah, when I was like 19, that was just like regular put-on music, and now it's like I would have to be on coke or something, you know?
Well, I mean, it's literally one fucking idea entire time, so... But,
it's,
let me, well, just so we don't get horribly sidetracked, let me throw on another... We could just talk shit for 9 hours.
We had to throw a bone to the Quebecois black punk scene, because Malveillance was actually one of my favorite bands back then.
Yeah, Malveillance, I really liked the early VAC stuff, Finland Anti-Christian Commando.
That's a great name.
Oh, yeah, you ever hear that first one? It's like L'Ombre de la Solitude or something like that? Mm-mm. That's good. I'll send that to you, yeah.
A band that this reminds me of also is who I was going to reference during Mortem, because the vocals are very similar. And this vocal's kind of similar, too, but I forgot, is Stella Polaris. Who
I'm dimly familiar.
I played it for you once, and you were like, oh shit, this is awesome. This is how, you know, all these other bands should sound. And they just recorded one demo and disappeared. But this band has a kind of... this band reminds me of them a little bit, too.
Alrighty. So next up, Livre au Chorognards. I don't fucking know, man. My French is so bad. But, this is just a cool part. Fuck it. We're just listening to the opening of this track. And that's the whole fucking album. It's just like, I mean, it is one or two ideas executed extremely well. And,
yes, it sounds sloppy, but conceptually it's very rigorous.
Yeah, it's dedicated to its own distinct internal vision, which is what black metal's supposed to be. So let's listen to the opening of this one. this is what would happen if, like, you know, one of us visited each other for a week, and it's like, okay, we got to crack out a record. Yes. This is what happens. It's like,
yeah, pretty much.
Fuck it, man. Okay, you got your spazzy, like, early like hardcore punk stuff. I'll just fucking put some like Slavic riffs over it, and we'll just kind of make it work, you know?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, these guys are slumming it, but this is me at peak performance playing. So, you know, but yeah, I love playing riffs like this. This is.
Well, my question is.
Each of them is good. Each of them is good and could, with a few little changes, be one of those riffs that made me sort of go, oh God, during the Ildskaer. Right? It's so close stylistically to this thing that other people knock off and make sort of vague, poorly realized versions of.
Yeah.
This is just bam, 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 bam. They're true masters of this style.
So it's so frustrating. Why the fuck did it take this long? Like, God damn it, guys! You were so close for so many years.
By guys, you mean the Quebecois?
Yes. Mm-hmm. You assholes! Fucking, you had this technology and you refused to use it.
Yeah, it's like. But don't you know the answer's been right under your nose the whole time? You've always had what you were looking for.
It was like, oh, it was the friends we made along the way. All you had to do was do this shit with real melodies. That's all you fucking had to do for years, and you refused.
Don't you remember? You're sons of glorious France. Trust in yourselves.
God damn it. I'm imagining a South Park episode about the Quebecois black metal scene. It's great.
It's so... Yeah, I mean, presumably, I'm sure the guys in this band will roll their eyes and be like, come on, there's like 10 bands that sound like this, but okay, we've, you know, they're not the ones that have made their way south or that we've found, and I think we know more about Quebecois raw black metal than some people, but...
I mean, for people who don't live in Quebec, I think it's pretty...
Yeah, for people who don't closely follow the scene, yeah.
No, I think, No, it's like, oh, you said those guys will roll their eyes. I mean, if they're true, you know, Quebecois black metal people, they will not respond to us in any fucking way.
That's true. If they're true, they won't listen to this. Yeah, they'll be like, this is in English? Jesus.
People talking about our music? Fucking lame.
It's, except, you know, fucking Akitsa does interviews, right? But, that's
true.
Yeah. It's, last track is just, this is basically, like, this is the lead part on this record. And this is, like...
this is just the following part of my
this is the immediately following part, yeah. So, I mean, just imagine... We've talked in the show about Migaus and stuff as a more death metal-y version of this American barbarian sound.
Yeah.
This is very just North American barbarian, very Vinlandic. And this is just, like, the most shitty lo-fi... drunk version of that kind of riff ever, and I love it.
All right, let's just keep running that section then. Shit. Yep. I love it. You know, this is the sort of thing that I talk shit about with some of the other bands that you show me, but here the charming quality actually works. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I like the surrounding music more. It's like, Jesus Christ, what the fuck is happening? It's like, it gets so off time, it falls back into time briefly before falling off again.
That's an important thing about being rhythmically off. It has to be part of a fluctuation. It has to, it has to be part of a creative and intuitive sense of time. It's
I love, usually when guys do this, because it's like, oh, those guys could totally have gone back and re-recorded it. They chose to leave all that in very deliberately, and it's like, fuck it. Usually I would say that's very, very mannered, I guess is the word you would use. But here it's like, fuck it, man, I'll roll with it. I'll get drunk and play this shit with you.
In some sense, I think just the key is you listen back to it, and it's just like, does it sound sick or not? And you can mess something up in a way that doesn't sound sick, or you can mess it up in a way that sounds sick.
Yeah, like the I don't know what fucking song was it? It was like one of the early Motorhead songs. I think it was maybe it was We Are the Road Crew or something where the guitarist is supposed to do a solo and he ended up fucking dropping it, which just created this huge feedback spike. So he just goes, "Oh fuck," and he picks it up and like continues the solo from where he was supposed to be, and it sounds pretty cool. Awesome.
I'll have to go. I don't know if it's We Are the Road Crew, but I will, just because. Maybe it is. Maybe because I heard that song was so fundamental for me. Maybe I heard it and was just like, well, this is how guitar solos normally are.
Well, all right. I think we're pretty much in agreement on that one. All right, so let's go out with some old Malveillance. This is a pointless question. What's your favorite song on Just Fuck Off?
Oh no, I listened to that album many times. I think we can do this. God, I know all these titles, and it's very hard to figure out which one's the best. But let's go for one with a sick title. Let's go with Extensive Slaughter.
That's the very last track.
That's the closer, yeah.
All right, Malveillance, Extensive Slaughter. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back with some more music. Coming off Malveillance, let's go to the complete opposite direction of black metal with Elcrost, Foregone Fables. So this was another just random find for me. These guys are pretty much brand new. I guess they started last year, put out a couple singles, put out the full length earlier, and now we've got this EP. I think you listened to a little bit of the full length, right?
Actually I did, yes. The one from just before it. Did I tell you that? I can't remember.
Yeah, you mentioned that to me, so I didn't hear that.
Benighted and Unrequited. I think that has some cool riffs on it in a pretty different style from here. So I think they're sort of they're definitely in the stage of figuring out what their thing is going to be. You know?
Yeah. And I guess their thing is, kind of. I mean, I guess you would call it progressive black metal, but it's not particularly technical. And really what they're reaching back to is the sort of prog black or, just prog metal stuff or prog extreme metal that you would hear in the 2000s. There's a lot of Opeth, early like Blackwater Park and before Opeth, before they were a prog rock band. There's some Psy, I think, like Infidel Art era Psy, that transitional period where they're going from kind of a weird black metal band into the prog stuff they do now. They kind of seem to be interested in these, like, liminal spaces of extreme metal meets progressive music where, like, I think they're interested in the transitional albums more than they are the full prog stuff that a lot of these bands turn into.
Yeah, well, first off, Elcrost is a great name, I think. That sounds like a Orcrist, or, what's the other one? There's some great, definitely a Lord of the Rings sword name. So
I don't know what it's from, if it means anything, but
it could be totally made up, which would be good. It's like, because it's hard to make up words like that and have them really have a ring to them.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So, I mean, what were your kind of obviously, this is very different from what we usually cover, but I think I do.
What both of us usually listen to, yeah.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. But I think I do like this. Obviously, it's a work in progress, but I think there's real potential here. Even though it's not like to my taste, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. Given that this is a young band, I think my attitude is like, I don't know that I could point to any single part of this and say I love it, but I thoroughly approve of the path they're on.
Yeah.
So I feel positive about this record. I think we probably have some fans who are more into this kind of stuff than we are, generally. Certainly if you're interested in... I mean, a thing we do talk about a lot on the show, and that we talked about a lot with the Mysticon, is this kind of stuff that channels these sides of black and death and doom metal that have been relegated to the box of the uncool.
Yeah.
Kind of forgotten about, and that's a place with great potential for newer bands. And I think this does that for sure. It has that capital G Gothic feel of a lot of the 90s and early 2000s extreme stuff, which I think is good. And it, I don't know, parts of this record remind me of Cradle of Filth. Oh, you do say Cradle of Filth here.
Yeah, there's a little bit of... There's a thread of kind of, Gothic extreme metal running through this. Yeah. Not so much that I would use that as like a genre descriptor, but clearly it's informative.
We could use that as a genre descriptor. I think I used that for Old Corpse Road back then.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because like the influences that they mention on their Bandcamp page are like... so Opeth, which makes sense, that's probably the most obvious thing here, but also Vehemence, which is a very strange thing to see, Ulver and Alcest. And really the only ones I detect are like the Opeth and Ulver.
I can hear a couple parts that sound like Alcest, but you could get to them in a different way. I don't like those parts very much. You could get to them in a different way,
Well, I think we are in agreement because both of us took samples from the same two songs, which are Earthbound and The Rape of a Nymph, which are clearly the standout tracks on this. Mm-hmm. Curse of the Impaler, this is a 4-track EP, so Curse of the Impaler is alright, it's them trying to do a more aggressive black metal song, and then the last one, Funeral for Spring, is just way too Opeth for me. It's way out there in prog.
Is that the one that sounds like Hotel California at the beginning?
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. Please don't. Yeah, I mean, don't please don't go in that direction. But I don't think they will. I think they like metal too much.
Yeah, I think that's the promising thing about this is that they do seem much more seriously metal than a lot of bands who attempt this sort of thing. And I think that's to their benefit, and I think they should keep emphasizing that. So let's get to some samples though. Let's just kind of set it up so we're just covering the same songs at the same time. So.
Oh, for sure.
Okay,
so do we want to start with mine then?
Yeah. Well, actually, your sample off Earthbound leads into mine, so let's just kind of pack them together.
Oh, nice. Yeah, directly. Okay, so.
Yeah. So we'll.
This is okay. So. I guess the thing...
Start at your timestamp and end at mine, I guess.
Oh, yeah, no, this is convenient, because the part I was really interested in was the riff right at the beginning of this sequence, and then I was like, in my notes, I was like, this develops in a nice way. Well, you get the development. Yeah. So for me, I just want to call attention to the I think this band... I guess I'll say my thing first, then, to make it clear. I think this band is in search of a standard metal riffing vocabulary. And they're exploring a lot of different styles. But sort of for the more aggressive parts of their music, with tremolo, picking, and growling, or whatever, how do you want to do it? There were some really cool kind of dissonant but not modern disso black things on Benighted and Unrequited that honestly I would like to hear more of. I think they do a pretty good job of kind of dissonant, chorded, dark death metal, which I think they could have more on this record. This is a little bit like those riffs, but a more major key thing that has that sun coming out from behind the clouds kind of feel. And I think this is really good.
Okay, so let's listen to a couple minutes of Earthbound. Just start at your timestamp and end at mine. That's a long sample, but I think that's a kind of a testament to what these guys do right, which is a lot of these kind of prog-touched bands have issues with structuring. Opeth is like, they commit a horrible structuring crimes all the time. They're just always trying to jam shit together. This record, the development of these ideas is a lot more organic, I think. There's a lot of ideas in 2.5 minutes there. I mean, you've got some pretty straightforward black metal stuff. You've got the sort of gothy Cradle Filth. You get into more open prog territory, and then you've got that big kind of 70s, 80s solo at the end. It's ambitious. And I think on this show we have a tendency to focus in on, find your micro niche and really dedicate yourself to it and elaborate on it. But I gotta give credit to what are probably young guys really trying to go for something bigger and more ambitious.
I agree, yeah. I mean, in terms of returning to that full-spectrum black and or death metal sound and getting out of these genre niches, I think that's it. Subgenre niches. I think this is this band has a lot of potential. And, I mean, in that passage, I guess I almost want to retract what I said earlier, because that is a great passage. I do love that sequence. Every single riff there is cool, and they relate. Particularly with just, like, if you're even just thinking about the trem riffs, like, there's that first kind of major key one, but the subsequent trem riffs develop it. Even in the kind of the Swedish-sounding, weirdly minor major thing that you liked.
Yeah.
That relates back to it. They all sort of echo each other in a really fluid way. So that shows that this band is capable of sustaining a certain kind of aggressive trem riffing for longer, and so they should, while changing it up. And that Cradle of Filth part, I think we both loved. And if you had played me that, absent, I mean, the production, you can tell it's not that, but if you had just played me that, I'd be like, oh, that's Cradle of Filth.
Yeah.
If you played me that blind, I'd just be like, that's one of those really cool, fruity parts of a Cradle of Filth song.
Yeah, I would say that if there's the biggest thing holding this back, and I think we can agree on that, is the production. Which is not bad, it's clear, but it's very flat. And
I think it's bad.
Yeah,
it's not their fault. All I mean by bad, they have limited resources, they're just building their their style, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're recording in someone's bedroom, but, like, so I'm not, like, criticizing them for it, but, like, I think the production, instead of just being bland, I think it actively hurts the music. Like, I think
no, I agree. Yeah.
And I almost never say that about shit, right? I pride myself on being able to listen through production.
Yeah.
Whether it's super raw or kind of sterile.
Yeah.
This has great songwriting, and the production just makes it sound unpleasant.
It makes it sound more boring than it is,
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
It's this, like, synthetic clean room thing. You know what it sounds like? It sounds like if you're recording, like, scratch tracks to send to members, you're just like, fuck it, I'm just gonna direct in just so these guys know what it sounds like and we can start building a song. That's what it sounds like. And
yes, this is fatally line in.
Yeah, and if you're gonna do music like this that is sort of big in scope and breadth, you need more richness in the sound to convey that. Because otherwise you get this, it's just very sterile,
Yeah, well, that's the trick of it, right? Because if you're recording, the weird thing is you can make an ambitious sounding, like, Disso Black Skronk album in your bedroom. Not that you should, but you could. And many have. You can make something like that has kind of like that kind of eerie, ringing, ulcerate guitar sound or whatever, right? You can line in that. And you could line in a decent simulacrum of, Finno-Frankish raw black, right?
Yeah.
But this is like, the sort of, the tragic grandeur of this band is that they're two kids who know nobody else who likes the shit they like, in Vietnam, making music that aspires to the heights of late 90s, early 2000s, big budget, big studio, major label black metal, and black death metal, right?
Yeah, it's I mean, it's got to be a very alien thing to try and make this music in a place like Southeast Asia, which does not have a very developed metal scene. I mean, there's a lot of things working against you there. Now, obviously, we're able to sidestep a lot of that technologically these days, but at the same time, it's you got to give them extra credit just for fucking trying to do this in Hanoi,
Yeah, I mean, I think in some sense that's the biggest challenge they face. But I think there are a few songwriting things that we could, given. I mean, these guys are a hell of a lot better musicians than I am, but, like, I'm sure we can give these...
More than me, too.
Yeah, exactly. Since it's an up-and-coming band, I think we can frame some of the rest of this, like, just actively advice.
Well, that's definitely fair. So let's get to the other song that I think that we thought was the most interesting, The Rape of a Nymph. And we've got two separate sections on this one. So let's go with yours first, and we can talk about what you're hearing on that one.
Eternal disgrace, salvation.
So yeah, that closing riff is fucking sick, man.
Yeah, I mean, that was so yeah. Here was my take on that. It's like that first riff, the leading trem riff, is melodically related to the closing riff, right?
Yeah, the closing version is an elaboration on the idea.
Oh, it's way better. Yeah, so for this band, it's like there's an unusual continuity of style for this band there. Mm-hmm. You said the first one reminded you of Cradle of Filth?
I think there's more Cradle of Filth on this record than I recognized at first. Like, even within the riffing technique, that could be off like Midian or maybe Damnation in a Day or something like that.
Cradle of Filth has this deathy sound to the riffing, right? It's like, and this is, so it reminded me of this kind of burly, single-string, low-end riffing that has this kind of melodic, but not the kind of poppy or triumphant melodicism in the Finno-French thing, right? More of that cruel melodicism in Gorgoroth or Dawn.
Yeah.
And so that's my paradigm for good melodic riffing. So I really like that stylistically. Mm-hmm. However, I don't think that one has a lot of character. It's like a placeholder for a riff like that. And then it goes into this breakdown thing, which is okay, fine, but with this production doesn't hit that hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I almost think they should cut that, because then we're back at the huge fucking riff. Like, that reminds me of, I mean, I wonder if these guys listen to Dawn. If they don't, they should. But there are, I mean, I would be if the production were different, I'd be hard-pressed to tell that from a riff on some of the earlier, more death metal-y sounding Dawn stuff. On one of their demos or on the first full length.
I think
and it's sweet because it doubles itself, but it doesn't repeat at all.
Yeah, no, it's ambitious. Well,
you know what I mean? Like, the second version of the riff has different note choice in it.
Well, I think that what you're getting is, I think there's something very similar to that Mysticon, because you mentioned that before. This sort of being comparable with the Mysticon. I think that they're dedicated to this sort of like deliberately restrictive riff development idea, because what you had right there is the opening version isn't great, but it's establishing building blocks in this sort of narrative way to get to the final complete version of the riff, which is interesting because there's something similar that goes on in my sample a little later on in the same song. So I think they are really invested in the idea of doing this shit the hard way and avoiding the sort of missteps of other prog bands where it's like, fuck it, we don't know where to go from here, drop a clean guitar in and we'll just start something new, basically.
Oh, agreed. I liked the overall structural idea there too. I just think they need some work on like the because there's so little stylistic continuity throughout this.
Yeah.
I feel like they need to work on just like
finding a center.
Just having the rhythm riffs. They almost never, in some sense, they almost never play rhythm guitar riffs because each part has its own unique big impact.
Yeah.
But because the first had just sort of, okay, thrash beat, basic riffing, right? Burly, dark, Black Death riff.
Yeah.
Make those better.
I get that. Yeah, no, definitely. So let me get to my sample that's a little bit later in the song. And this is going to kind of tie into what I was saying. I really like the patience these guys show in the way they develop these songs. It's definitely something that's like, it can stick the landing or not, depending on how good the material is, but I appreciate the sort of very specialized writing, if you know what I mean. Like, there's a real commitment to these ideas that I appreciate. And
oh, you mean like each new thing they try, each new idea they introduce, they're actually trying on.
Well, yeah, and it's like they'll do stuff like, okay, we're going to sink 2 minutes straight up into developing a single idea, slowly kind of unfolding it and unpacking it, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But that's what's necessary to get the result that we want. you know? And I really respect that. So this is from the same track, The Rape of a Nymph, about a minute later. So let's just try that out. That's really fucking cool, man. I really like that.
That's
a lot.
Gorgeous.
And yeah, I mean, talk about commitment. I mean, that's really 2 minutes spent on basically one idea to get it from point A to point E or whatever. You know, all the interceding parts are simply building slowly on top of it, you know, structuring it almost like ambient music. Or like, you know, kind of jazz vamping to slowly adjust things, you know, build on top of this basic framework established at the beginning of it, and then you're rewarded at the end of that with this really beautiful kind of like oniric synth melody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know words. You like that?
That was a good word, bro.
No, I think one thing that's important to address is something that informs...
such a detailed melody. Like that big riff from earlier in the song that I picked. There's like... That's the opposite of a placeholder riff. There's so much...
There's a lot going on. Yeah.
It's expressive, it's well-timed, and the quality of the writing completely earns the sort of over-the-top sentiment and the deliberately schmaltzy keyboard sound. Like,
yeah, and
it should sound like that.
Yeah, well, and it's also interesting because I like the idea that the whole synth melody, it's got sort of multiple moods in it. You know, it's like it is very schmaltzy and sentimental at the beginning, but then you get into that sort of more dramatic Gothic flair on the back end. There's a story being expressed within this single melody. You know, there's an arc to it, which is a really fucking hard thing to do. I really respect that. And I think that one thing we do have to note is, it's hard to put your finger on, but there is a sort of peculiar melodic sensibility you'll find in a lot of Asian black and death metal bands. Obviously,
whoa, there you go with the stereotype.
No, it's
I know.
Well, but it's interesting where I feel like a lot of the Asian bands are, even within more aggressive and traditionally black or death metal music than this, their melodic style tends to be more willing to go to these like extreme ranges of emotion where we might dismiss it as like sentimental or silly. I think that's a strength to this music.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I noticed that a lot with Japanese bands for sure.
Yeah.
So Psy, I mean, I think also a thing that came up to me before, also with the kind of vampiric melodies on the Danish band, whose name I'm not going to forget, with the more vampiric melodies is a Hakuja, Dew of Blood, which has these. It came out in the DSBM era and has these kinds of cut and paste sort of programmed drums, but just riff for riff, it's just fucking brilliant.
I remember that. You've mentioned this demo before, haven't you?
I guess it's a demo. He just dropped a full-length demo and, again, just went away.
Yeah.
And it has these... sort of a DSBM mood, but very much just black metal. And it's... it has this... You know what it is? It's this whole aesthetic, at least for the Japanese. I can't speak particularly to here.
Yeah.
But for the Japanese, it has to do with the sort of... if the Europeans have Orientalism, the Japanese have, let's call it, Occidentalism or Continentalism, right? They're interested in this particular old world, this abstraction of certain qualities of old world European, German, and French culture.
We've talked about how, you and I have talked specifically about how much we love the refraction of, like, medieval Europe through the Japanese prism. It's like one of the coolest fucking things in the world.
Yeah, and they're really interested in this kind of like, and it's kind of mediated through late 19th century stuff. Like, this band has artwork that looks a little bit like that kind of Aubrey Beardsley stuff, sort of. These mannered kind of highly stylized, kind of feminine representations of the Middle Ages. And it's so this band is drawing from that well, I think, in a really cool way.
I think that what we're kind of touching on is like the coolest part of this band is this dreamlike quality to
yes.
it. Know? I think that's something that's really beautiful, and I like that they're not doing it in like, dreamy fucking major key post black metal. It's like,
we like that it doesn't actually sound like Alcest, even though
it's like it's dreamy in that dreams aren't just like, oh wow, I'm sitting in the field and I'm petting all the pets that ever died for me. It's like, no, it's abstract and a little confusing, and it's got darker and lighter moments. There's I like this. It's like I'm not a huge fan of all the choices they make, but there's something really respectable about what's happening here. And I think with just a better production job, that would immediately put this like in like the upper echelons of the pile. I could see people picking up on these guys hard with like a little bit more work on the structuring and a better production job.
Yeah, I think I believe in Elcrost.
I believe in Elcrost too. Good fucking job, guys.
We believe in Elcrost. We want you to conquer the world. You just drop out of school at the earliest opportunity, and
I guess the biggest thing to say is Elcrost, you're basically way better than most of your influence. It's like,
that's true. Like, we're people who come from like, the different sides of black and death metal, and this has convinced us. So,
maybe there's something to this prog thing, black metal guy.
It's I don't know. Yeah, they play so many notes, but they sound good. It's
what's happening here?
It's making me have a tender feeling. Is this making me weak?
I don't appreciate these strange melodies defeating my warrior spirit.
Yeah, exactly. It's like this sort of sensual, decadent music making me think of beautiful maidens when I should be disciplining my chaste body and
It's like, this is the music that plays when the Hunchback meets Xerxes in 300 or something.
No, because it's not evil, but
it's
but it is decadent. It is this kind of like, it has this, that is a Cradle of Filth kind of thing, but with Cradle of Filth it's more OTT. This has this way of like, the art for this is these sort of like knights and ladies and fairies and people fainting. It is this kind of way of looking back over a certain kind of medievalism through a haze of beauty and eroticism. Kind of like coldly watching these stories unfold rather than being invested in them in a first order way, and sort of taking this pleasure in that.
Yeah, it's a cool kind of elaborate aesthetic that is kind of singular, and I think just expand on it. I really like it.
Yeah. Yeah. So just make it better, guys. More of that.
All right. So I think this is a good record. So let's take a quick break and get to our final record of the night.
Hi, this is Taylor from Crushing the Scepter, and you're listening to Terminus Podcast.
Okay, last record of the night in what will, I think, be one of our most contentious segments we've ever done on the show. We have
we probably do. You've said this about different things before, but I think we actually probably do disagree more about this than anything else.
Well, and disagreeing in very meta ways, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we've got Toadeater's Bit to ewigen daogen. So, God, how do we even approach this? So this is the second album by Toadeater. I wasn't familiar with them before, and this is a record that I like, and I also recognize is very calculated and informed by all the developments of the black metal scene in the past 5 years. And I guess my thesis is, if it hasn't been recognized by most people yet, this is what black metal sounds like and probably what it will sound like for the next 5 to 10 years. I think this is not necessarily a defining statement, but it is representative of what the norm of black metal is going to be going down the road, at least for the immediate future.
Man, that's bleak. It's, yeah, and so I guess I'd agree with you, and I'd just say, like, what's fascinating about it is, like, I mean, because the people who listen to this show, this will have zero interest to most of our listeners, this record, except insofar as, like, our thoughts about it. And it's, to people who are actually invested in black metal, or understand the genre as a tradition, or are interested in developing it, this will appear completely irrelevant. But as far as what people in the wider music world think black metal is now, this is it. I agree. And so if you look down at the YouTube comments, it's remarkable. Somebody says, interesting evolution from an hardcore punk band to this, quote, classic black metal. Very good album. Horns up. What do you mean by classic black metal? Do you mean the early 90s? Do you mean France? Do you mean, do you mean any of the canonical scenes? No.
Yeah,
but it does sound more like, black metal than hardcore or post-hardcore.
I can feel the resentment seething off you through my headphones.
So, the more I listened to this record, the more I hated it, I think, or the more I thought about it. Yeah, it's
I get you, and I understand the resentment for it, because this is not coming from within black metal. Or at least not coming from within black metal as we perceive it as a sort of subculture and a movement,
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's coming... Yeah, you can tell immediately that it's played by people who's... I mean, it's also part of a positive trend. I mean, one trend that's happened is post-black, right? So you said this is getting billed as post-black. Where have you seen that? Well, I guess on the Black Metal promotion channel it immediately says post-black metal. But where else have you...
I mean, on Metal Archives it says post-black metal. I think on the labels pages hosting the album it says post-black. which I guess is part of the question is, I mean, I don't read this as post-black because when I hear post-black, I imagine the stuff informed by post-rock and emo and post-punk and stuff like that, which this is not, I don't think, substantially informed by.
Oh, yeah. So I think this is profoundly informed by those things, but in terms of its approach to how you simulate black metal songs, it's kind of like, or to what this band hears in black metal that they want to bring out. But it's part of a broad trend. Like, when we first heard post-black metal, it referred to some bands that truly are dreck, which this is not. This is not, this is not like, this isn't, totally fluffy music. It's not incompetent music. It's not like, at the beginning, I guess post-black would refer to, like, the later Alcest stuff, which...
I first heard it with Alcest and Amacers and stuff like that.
Yeah, okay. Or with, like, this whole range of bands that are only on the internet. I can't remember the most... The annoying thing is these names all sound so much alike, I can't remember the most typical one. But there's one like Sour that's like the vaguely Scottish version of it.
Sayor or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, these bands are huge on the internet with like preteens and teenagers.
Yeah.
And they've informed there's a band called Hermodr that's kind of sounds a little more like a Norse band, but is basically this. And those bands, I think the dominant post-black sound was basically like explosions in the sky with blast beats. Except explosions in the sky already had blast beats. So it's like explosions in the sky by somebody who's heard was interested in a couple tracks off the end of Philosophum. Whatever, right?
I get that. I guess the thing is...
And this doesn't sound like that at all.
Yeah, this is... Well, I mean, we had an extensive discussion about this section before we got into talking about it on air. So really what we're talking about is the after... we can't get around it. We're talking about the after effects of Mgła. And we're talking about how Mgła has basically irrevocably shaped a large portion of black metal. Because there's a lot of Mgła on this record. And a lot of this comes down to how you feel about Mgła being, I'll say, in my opinion, probably the most important black metal band of the past 10 years in terms of influence and shaping the development of the genre.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just true in terms of, I don't know that, in terms of just importance to music, that's clearly true. I think Mgła's importance has been felt more outside black metal. But it's produced this whole world of sort of
this sort of it's sort of a parallel dimension.
That's what I'm saying.
Metal.
It's helped create this sort of, if post-black suffered from lack of a vocabulary, like we want to make these very sort of nice sounding, vaguely minor key, epic kind of sentimental melodies with a kind of black metal touch that makes it a little more intense or something.
Yeah.
Well, the bands that did this were like crushingly incompetent originally.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, had no ear, had no sense for how black metal worked, and frankly didn't understand post-rock either, because like Mogwai's a good band.
Yeah.
We both agree on that. I mean,
definitely.
Mgła is a great band. Mgła is obviously a black metal band, and at least, certainly in their tradition, I would say that their most influential record with Exercise in Futility, largely not a black metal record. Like, they create a guitar technique that emphasizes these kinds of very good-sounding, hyper-consonant intervals, creates this kind of intermediate between happy and sad kind of feeling.
Yeah.
These things that the post-black metal bands were sort of groping towards, Mgła does from within a much more authentic black metal and goth rock and whatever framework. And suddenly that changes. Suddenly there's equipment available to all these people who have kind of this interest in black metal, but aren't so much interested in what black metal itself has to offer.
And also just people who didn't have, obviously...
any interest in it before.
Well, not just that, but obviously, clearly to create something like Mgła, you know, the main guy behind that, you know, he just goes by M or something for the band, but he's, you know, one of those once every few years visionaries, you know?
Oh, yeah, he's a toweringly good songwriter.
Yeah, you know, and I mean, more than just being a good songwriter, obviously I love Mgła and everything, but the important thing is just to create almost from nothing this whole technique and this whole different way of perceiving this music is insane, you know?
Yeah, you know, the best black metal bands create their own harmonic vocabulary.
Yeah.
And the really, really good ones create almost their own technique for writing riffs. And so Mgła certainly has done that, right? It's these kind of chiming arpeggios, which sort of had been a thing in BM before. These very kind of satisfying big payoff melodies, which sort of had been a thing before. And
but to rigorously to like rigorously build an entire band around these ideas and expand from it is
he's like, this could be a whole sonic universe, right?
It's like its whole fucking genre, basically.
So it's like, you know, often the beginning of a genre, it's like the importance of an origin, right? There's the early 90s, and then there are various origin points afterward. Your origin point for the French scene, your origin point for the Slavs.
Yeah.
These sorts of fertile points where a bunch of potentials are developed all at once.
Yeah.
And you can keep returning them. Mgła's clearly done that with, I guess they started in Slavic black metal, and now they've created this, sure, you could call it a modern black metal sound coming out of them. Mgła is certainly a modern black metal band, right?
It's one of those things where it's like you could hardly call Mgła underrated, but I think people fail to recognize the importance of how they released two tactical nuclear devices on the metal scene back to back with Hearts Toward None and Exercise in Futility. Now, I like With Hearts Toward None much more than Exercises. But, honestly, I could say that really both of those records point to different places. I think that most of the bands... I think the black metal scene picked up...
I've actually listened to With Hearts more. Or, sorry, to Exercises more.
Yeah, well, Exercises, I think, had the broader appeal outside of the black metal scene, and With Hearts just fucking... it just shot black metal riff technique to shit. It was, you know, the single, like, biggest advance in black metal riff technique in a single album we'd seen in God knows how many years. But basically what we're dealing with is, with a band like Toadeater and all the bands similar to them, I guess, is we've got a parallel scene emerging that is like black metal, but also clearly its own thing. And what's the fallout and what's the reaction to that becoming this just new entity within or without black metal, depending on how you interpret it?
Yeah, and so the bands that do that, so, where else do you group this record? Well, you mentioned... You know, on the one hand, as far as these bands that take up the Mgła thing, all these bands that almost, like, restart their understanding of black metal from Mgła.
Yeah.
Everyone knows Uwada, right? Uwada. You know, that guy has an ear for older black metal, too. You can hear he hears the roots of Mgła. He sounds a lot like Naglfar's Vitra, and a lot of other stuff like that. But it's very... very different from black metal, right?
Yeah.
It has a sense... He's almost a sickeningly skilled songwriter. He writes hooks that sound like they're off of 80s hair metal songs. Also, there's this band Gaia is immensely popular on the internet. There's this band Grima. And again, if you listen to this show, if you're like an underground BM guy, you probably haven't even heard of these bands, but they're huge on YouTube with the kids.
Yeah.
And it's what a lot of people, and the metal press and whatever, thinks these are very relevant. Grima, again, it's like some of those riffs sound like Canarus Quintet or something, like some, and there are some really, really good riffs on there. But what it's after is a completely different thing. That's this kind of immediately gratifying, big, emotional climax music.
Yeah.
That, it's just a different thing. And, I can't say it interests me at all, but it's very important right now. So this is part of that, but also some other tendencies.
Yeah, I mean, this is clearly coming from... Oh, like, it's... Because these guys are hardcore guys, right?
Probably.
They're a Euro hardcore
I scrolled down in the comments and saw that, but you could tell it almost from the first note.
Yeah,
this, right?
I get that. Well, I guess my thing is... I think what we're seeing is... Imagine the Mgła clones sort of like Burzum clones, where it's highly influential and most of the people taking from that band are missing the secret ingredient of sort of like... I mean, basically just genius, like kind of creative genius that informs that stuff. Mm-hmm. And it falls apart when you try to imitate it without that. Mm-hmm. But I see... Yeah. Because, I mean, it sounds overly dramatic, but I think history will bear it out that the man behind Mgła is... We're dealing with a guy essentially on the level of somebody like Infernus, or, any of the, Euronymous, any of the great black metal guitar masters who shaped the genre. Obviously, that sounds sort of ridiculous just because we're so much later down the road that he's not establishing the genre.
He's not as important because he has to draw from that origin himself. Mm-hmm. But he's definitely, if you wanted to create a history of big black metal guitar people, you'd probably have, Euronymous, Infernus.
You could have Varg,
Yeah, I guess you have to have Varg too. You'd probably have somebody. It's hard to pick a single representative from France, from Finland, maybe Satanic War Master, I'd say. Or Shatrog, depending on which you think is more important. But both of those guys kind of doing a less ambitious thing, so almost maybe not.
Yeah.
Sank probably is sort of like, although
Sanko was
he wasn't the first. Yeah, I'd say, although he wasn't the first, right? Darkin and the BBH should have developed the technique. Sanko is probably the great Slavic virtuoso, right?
Yeah, no, even as not a huge Sanko guy, I can acknowledge how important that is.
Mm-hmm. He might have been, if you wanted to pick somebody for the decade from 2000 to 2010, it might have been him.
Yeah, I mean, him and, Hostjarl from Deathspell.
Hunter Hendricks.
But Hostjarl from Deathspell, obviously. There's all these figures.
No, DS. It's true. Yeah, it's true. DSO, obviously. Yeah.
Probably. I would say
maybe we'd say the French guy is DSO guy just because he played so many good. Yeah, he played so much good traditional French black metal before he did DSO that even though he didn't invent that style, it's him. Yeah.
No, I mean, I would say probably the two most important black metal bands of the past 10 years are Mgła and DSO. Even though I'm not a big DSO guy, I can't deny how important it is. So let's start picking this record apart, though, and we can kind of hone in. So let me start with a sample off the first full track of the album called Conquering the Throne. And immediately you're going to be barraged with a lot of Mgła ideas, but I think on deeper inspection, they function kind of differently. So let's give this a try.
Waiting for it, just beginning of
So, obviously, the very opening part of that is totally Magla. That's straight exercise in futility. But when they kick into the main riff, usually Magla would sit on that arpeggio, but instead they do this kind of like skronky high chording stuff instead, which is different. And even the way these kind of arpeggiated riffs are harmonized are very different.
Do you mean
Magla.
the do-do-do, do-do-do, do-do-do?
Is
that the one you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about the da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, you know, that kind of dancing.
Oh, okay. You're talking about the last one, the riff at the end. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and also, which is like a variation off the second riff on this passage. But, so, I mean, I guess, you know, getting back to Magla, we're not going to be able to stay away from it. It's easy to say it's a knockoff of Magla. I don't think so. I think Magla has just created a sort of technique and a technology, and you're just going to fucking hear stuff that sounds like that forever now. You know?
Oh, yeah, no, I don't think this is a Magla clone by any means. No.
What you think is much worse.
Yeah, I think it's worse. It's, I mean, I don't know, there are a lot of bad Magla clones, but it's not, you wouldn't, the fact that it doesn't sound like Magla isn't exactly a blow against it. It's not really trying to do that. It seems to me like somebody working with a paradigm of, so, I mean, if one trend is Miglacore, another is Central European hardcore people moving towards black metal via Slavic black metal.
Yeah.
There are a number of good bands that come out of this thing that get called post-black, but if you but to many people will sound a lot like black metal bands. So, basically just good post-black. So there's the first Wigadude record, I would say, is the towering best example of this.
Yeah, Wigadude, I think nobody's going to argue that Wigadude is not an excellent band.
Yeah, no, Wigadude is phenomenal. We both really like them. They honestly made me pay more attention to any of this post-sounding stuff in the first place.
Yeah.
I got in with their second one once they just started sounding like Marduk and Gorgoroth, but the first one was maybe still their best. There's just a certain kind of, an urgent and distressed quality that's obviously post-hardcore. There's kind of a...
It's really, like, vicious music, despite how pretty it is sometimes.
It is absolutely vicious. Even though it has these kind of sentimental melodies, it finds... What Wigadude does extremely well, that a lot of other bands sort of do, is that they find this resonance between pedal point on the low string / octave of it on the guitar, as a common point between stuff like Amon-Ra, which is one of the Wigadude guys' main bands, or there might be two guys from Amon-Ra in it, between, like, sludge, post-metal kind of stuff, Neurosis-y, Cult of Luna-y stuff on the one hand, maybe some Screamo-y stuff on the one hand, and then, like, Sanko-esque Hate Forest Druid stuff on the other hand.
Yeah.
And they add in this more, instead of just, like, octave riffs like Screamo bands do, they add in this lusher, chorded, dark minor stuff like you get there. And so other bands have moved along this same, let's say, what is it? Let's say the post-hardcore to Slav Black pipeline. The radicalization pipeline. So, a lot of bands on Les Acteurs de l'Ombre, which I think is a great label, Lodlow. Yeah. Time Lurker is big, Deluge, and I think the best one might be Audacious from Lithuania. They also sound very Migla-y. Also in the Netherlands, we've talked before about Laster, and maybe even Turia sounds more like lo-fi and cult, but I think Turia kind of has this thing going too, where they're clearly like post-hardcore arty people discovering, there's this lush droning thing in Eastern European black metal.
Yeah. I just as an aside, like when we talk about incorporating Magla, there's going to come a point probably in the near future where saying that is like, you're doing these minor key riffs like Mayhem. It's like, yeah, that's just what black metal is now.
Oh God. Well, I mean specifically that they're doing the arpeggios. Similar guitar tone. It sounds beefy. It's like way too beefy to be black metal. So these, I would group those all as good bands that are sort of not they're moving towards black metal in this way. This band seems like part of that general tendency.
Yeah.
Post-hardcore people moving towards black metal. There's a lot of Migla in it, but they seem to be attempting to simulate Slav black. And I mean that in the way that this album kind of wants to give you this naturey, folky affect without giving you the substance of it.
Well, I'm curious about that because one of the things that struck me is, initially one of the points of conversation was just, people call this post-black. I mean, these are all techniques that Slavic black metal bands have been doing for a shit ton of years. So, I mean, do you think that it's imitative? Because I think there's a lot of stuff that's directly inspired by, like, Roman Sanko stuff.
Oh, it is directly inspired by it. I think it's just... I mean, so, here's a confusing thing, right? Post-black in its roots kind of has it. If you want to think about, like, Wolves in the Throne Room or whatever, they kind of had this... They had heard some Sanko and BBH and sort of had an idea of how it sounded. They clearly didn't listen at all to the melodies or the chord shapes.
Yeah.
But they sort of wanted a vibe like that.
They got the idea of the texture.
Yeah, so that's kind of at the root of post-black, even though maybe WITTR isn't a post-black band till much later. But, they kind of are a black... They're just mediocre black metal band.
The Cascadian stuff is the immediate predecessor to post-black.
Exactly, yeah. So the Cascadian sound already has this vaguely Slavic quality.
It's all guys who were listening to Weakling, and Weakling just listened to Blazefirth Hall and cleaned it up for Americans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This guy also has very Cascadian vocals.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
It's, but they, so that influence is there in the background. I think this guy is listening to, I think he is probably listening to Druk or Hate Forest, and if he's not, he's definitely listening to Vigadude.
Yeah,
because Vigadude makes those more sort of like, the more ominous sounding, that's a particularly Wigadude kind of thing. The note choice there, but like he's certainly listening to those sorts of things. What it seems to me like is, and it seems to want to claim that kind of aesthetic territory. The lyrics are very naturey.
Yeah, the lyrics are all like hyper eco stuff. So
yeah, they're not a big fan. I like, or it's not the kind of eco that I like. Very human-centric view of the eco, although I don't think that's what they're going for. They, there are moments on this that sound kind of folky. Like, they have these weird sort of lurching rhythms that are kind of interesting, honestly. Like, the last track seems like an attempt at a Burzum thing. So they're trying to take this post-black thing and move it towards this earthy, folky Slavic territory, but I think, like, just incompetently. Like, that do-do-do-do-do-do-do riff is, I would say that's like a cringeworthy riff.
You see, that doesn't bother me at all. I don't know, it's just like there's... I mean, maybe it's just because you're so much more informed about what's happening in modern black metal. Mm-hmm. So we've got, like, similar backgrounds, but I've just been out of the scene longer than you. So... I mean, maybe that is... I mean, it's like a stock riff to me, but it's not, like, unbearable. But maybe it would be had I heard all these more recent records that you're kind of referencing.
Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds more... I mean, it's aiming more for the Slavic thing than a lot of these recent records are. I mean, my favorite part of that passage is the blatantly Migla arpeggios, which sound more like that crop of new bands.
I like the Inquisition part. That big
actually, I do too. Yeah, that may be a low-key parts that sound like Inquisition may also be a fixture of this new black metal or blackish metal or whatever.
I think they're just picking up... Inquisition picked on the rock and roll groove and then inserted that, sort of unadorned. Inserted AC/DC groove parts unadorned into black metal, and everyone loved it.
Uwada does that too.
Yeah.
But I guess what I think is, like, if in some sense it strikes me as you can almost hear the different parts in that riff. I think that's why my ear fixed on it. It's so Migla has these kinds of arpeggios that have a kind of regularity to them.
Yeah.
But Migla builds melodies that are dynamic and have the asymmetry necessary to a melody across those little segmented grid parts. So you get, like, the rhythm, the basic rhythm is da 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 da, but there's this developing idea across it. This is like sort of has that 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, and that's not necessarily bad, right? You can write a good riff like that. Similarly, you can write a good riff that's just a scale, but together you cannot. And to me, this sounds like a, I mean, I'm already being mean about this album, so I'm just going to say it. It's
that's
like,
fine.
I mean,
fuck it.
It sounds like the first. It sounds like the first riff of that kind he wrote, and they stuck it on there. Okay. Like it sounds like him figuring out the technique for the first time.
I got you. Well, let's go to one of your samples and see what you're kind of focusing on. Yeah.
So I think I didn't know I disliked this as much at the beginning as I do now. So I tried to go for samples, but I think it's still good. This actually reinforces the point I was going to make. Okay. Here's what I think is there are similar issues at work here, but here's a better, I think this is his best. If this band is trying to be a black metal band, then this is this is their most convincing Slav black style riff. This is off of Returning the Crown. And, again, I think even the last riff, I'm going to say, is a hell of a lot better than most Wolves in the Throne Room riffs.
Oh, pretty much everything is better than fucking Wolves in the Throne Room.
I mean, in terms of, like, actually paying attention to how the melodic color in this stuff works or whatever, sure.
Yeah.
But let's go to this. So this is Returning the Crown.
Let's listen to the opening of that song. So what is it about that riff that strikes you so much?
Well, it's got a shape. The first one was just had this kind of written on a grid effect where it's got just these notes cycling up and down in the grid. This one, you can hear the grid cycling at the very beginning. The da 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 is, oh my god, we need to play something here to fill out that part. However, it just works. So you could do that part a lot better. You honestly might do it better just by hitting the same note over and over again, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Like, I like drones. But you can hear it as a wind-up riff for what comes after. It sort of tension releases into the ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So there's this kind of it releases into the second part. The second part has these more drawn out. It breaks off the grid a little bit. It has these more drawn out trem phrases, and that allows them to play slightly against the beat. I think there's a little bit of elongation, a little bit of give in them.
Yeah.
Good interval choice. It has this kind of scything down kind of feel. It sounds harsh in the way that, it has that kind of sharp, rough. It has that certainly sharper or rougher than a lot of other Migla core or post-black. And then it's got that little turnaround at the end. So there's kind of an arc to the riff. It points in a certain direction. There's an idea that moves across it. And it just sounds heavier than the last one. It's got
okay, I get you.
Yeah.
I mean, is that... I was going to say, so is that what this record's missing for you? Is the more, like, kind of aggressive churning stuff? But then I'm sure this record's missing a lot of things for you. So.
Yeah, I think I just perceive it as inauthentic, right? So it's just, but yeah, sure. I mean, that part wasn't bad. If the band's goal is to eventually play black metal, that shows they're on the right track. I mean, it's, yeah, I think I've said what I have to say about it, but, like, parts like that, if your perception of this record is as sounding like Slav black, well, there's a part that actually does. Or at least, not really, because it's way too arpeggiated. It has that Migla kind of feel, and it's all single string. There.
I mean, I say sounds like Slav black in this very, like, literal sense of sounds. I mean, fucking Wolves in the Throne Room sounds like Slav black. Obviously, it's not. Obviously, the melodic ideas are totally different, but yeah, it's gathering the affect of it,
Yeah, sure. This is, and it's doing it in this kind of, I mean, it's missing the whole chorded textural idea of all these bands, but it's, in some sense, that's the point, because they're trying to combine this sort of brooding Slav melody thing with the Migla arpeggios. Mm-hmm. So there they do it pretty well, I think.
And then, well, we've got another part where both of us sampled the same song.
Oh, yeah.
Which is usually a good sign of things to talk about. And you've got the beginning of this next one, so what's the lead-in for that?
So, this is just, the lead-in is just a part that kind of inherently sounds cool, even if you're doing the sort of cookie-cutter version of it. And this is absolutely the cookie-cutter version of it. But it's a sort of, it's a phoned-in version. Again, it's like he's learning this style. They play at the beginning a kind of Slav black riff that, hey, just always sounds kind of cool. And then there's a more aggressive thing that, again, I think as far as black metal soundy bits, has some potential. So.
All right, let's give the opening a try. So you just, I mean, that's very like stock Slav black there.
Yeah, I mean, almost that riff doesn't even register as Slav black to me. It sounds like Wolves in the Throne Room. Da 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 da. God, if I hum the intervals, that riff sucks too. But I think it's like at least there are power. There's some power chord kind of thing, and it sounds like, I think what's good, gives it some character, is that there's the way it's harmonized. I think there are two guitars there.
Yeah.
Are they playing power chords a fifth apart or something, or is it power chords with a lead over it?
Could be something like that. It could even be something simpler, like just having like a hanging open string underneath the riff. I mean, that's something that...
Oh, no, it's not that. I do that all the time.
Yeah, I was about to say that's what I do whenever I want to make it sound Slavic. Fuck it. open A, play on the D, whenever.
Yeah.
No, it's I mean, a lot of that is also Magla derived, like we were talking about while we were listening.
You were saying the part at the beginning is very Magla, and then the breakdown at the end.
Yeah, that breakdown part is directly something from Exercise in Futility. Yeah. Like, I think that I could probably find that riff if I went back to the album.
And here it's got a bit more of a hoppy kind of folk feel, but like, or at least they're trying. I think that's the role it's playing in this music, is to supply that.
Yeah, I get that. So,
but yeah, I don't know. I thought that part was fine.
Jesus Christ! All right, so a little bit later in the song, I've got one, and then we'll really, you know, for a little bit, we'll get into the weeds with some real hard questions. All right. So this is later off Returning the Crown. This is a part that I really enjoyed a lot. Mm-hmm. These are just really fucking cool riffs. So this is kind of the climactic moment of the song, so let's give that a try. Yeah, so I think we're in agreement that's probably just the best riff on the album.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty outstanding, you know. Even as kind of critical as we've been, that's sort of undeniable.
Yeah, that has that sounds that again has the arpeggiated feel of a Migla riff, but it also has the internal momentum that makes a good Migla riff.
Mm-hmm.
And the beginning, and it has two different harmonic characters within the riff. You got da 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 da. There's a subtle change between those two repetitions, an interval step change. That gives it that tighter or sharper sense of it relative to this other Migla stuff. It almost sounds a little bit. God, I mean, this band sounds like they basically don't listen to any of the music that informed black metal, but it almost sounds a little like a classical thing there, right?
Well, I mean, that's probably a type of black metal band that's coming up. I mean, there's probably guys.
Yes.
There's teenagers right now who are probably making bands who haven't listened to Mayhem. You know?
Well, I got something for that just in a second, but but yeah, and then it releases into that, just sitting on that whole step. But it sounds fine because it's been set up in a kind of cool way. It's got this more intense motion. It releases. And I mean, I wish you could blast that as a really heavy riff.
Oh yeah, no, I
kind of wish they did that.
I wish they had blasted with that riff. You know, it's like that would have been killer. Just that little dyadic, like 2-note thing with a big old blast beat under it. That would have been fucking sick. So here's my question. What? I get in this like rough sense what you mean or how you feel, but you know, we're not about relying on intuition here. What about this feels so inauthentic to you?
Well, let's start with that. Complete severance from tradition. It sounds like their reference points are, it sounds like they're going for, it doesn't sound like they've heard any music, certainly from before Slav Black. It doesn't sound like they've heard any of the deep cuts from that. It's possible they made this just by listening to things like Vigadude. Entirely possible.
I got that.
It's I think there's a... I don't think he understands how melodies in this music are for the guitar, the band in general. I don't mean to single out any one member of the band, but I feel like so a black metal sense of melody has something to do with thrash and crust. Okay, or D-beat rather. It has something to do with folk music. It has something to do with classical music. It develops through all these different mutations. I'm sure this band listens to some kind of hardcore, but I'm not even sure it's the kind that influenced black metal. I think it sounds like it's drawn from a very, very shallow well. And that's, I think, the concern of a lot of the Migla stuff is, look, sure, Migla's extremely important, and is a new origin of their own in the tradition. But just like the Migla guy is, he's clearly listening to... Just like Migla guy isn't only listening to, I don't know what his main Slav influences would have been. Maybe Blaze Birth and Behemoth or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that, yeah. Maybe Sanko, although it doesn't really sound like it at all. Whatever his regional influences were, his immediate influences... And I guess also he just really likes Swedish stuff, right? As much Sacramentum stuff as he was listening to, he also was listening to 80s goth rock. He also was listening to Emperor. He was listening to...
There's a wide range of stuff.
Stompy punk... Yeah. Stompy punkish black metal. You can tell he knows his everything back to front, and all those earlier origin points surface again in his style. It has this immediate sugary payoff that a lot of these other bands don't, but it's grounded in this deep substance. I feel like, and when he wanted to write a straight-up black metal record, like on the last one, he just dashed it off. He was like, sure, let's do it. Some storming, sinister black metal, why not? I've got a few of these riffs in the can.
I get where you're coming from. I understand it. At the same time... When this, and I don't have any answer to this question, don't take it as like a trick question or something, but how many years from Norway do we have to get where that is no longer a necessary origin point for your band?
I think if you write poetry, you should read the Iliad. And I think it'll be worse if you haven't.
Okay, I think I think that might be like a crux of like a radically different perspective between you and me on art. I think there is an alternative path, and there is a value to sort of like aggressively jettisoning, earlier stuff. Like that the ignorance of that can be a sort of creative form in and of itself. Do you know what I mean?
I see the thing you're getting at. I see what you're getting at. Like, let's think of like pre-internet music. I think that's a valid idea. There's some difference between pre and post-internet music.
Definitely, yeah.
In pre-internet music, all these traditions were intensely reactive against each other. And also the press reinforced these processes, so they helped produce these. This happened in rock, too.
Yeah.
Right? They helped produce these movements that when we, post-internet, listen back to it, we hear all this relationship between, say, late 80s death metal and Norwegian black metal. But at the time, that was seen as these totally different things. Or we hear this relationship between shoegaze music and goth, but at the time, this is big distinction, or whatever, right? You can go on, right?
Yeah, I get that.
Not that the shoegaze people were reacting against it per se, but certain styles really, there was this kind of productive forgetting, I think. But it was also a reacting against. It was also in dialogue with the thing before it, even if it sort of like... and the way it reacted against things from before it was often it reached back to things from before that.
Yeah.
So black metal reacts to death metal by reaching back to primordial 80s extreme metal.
Right? Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. And so this doesn't... I don't know if this is this doesn't seem to be a part of the conversation at all.
I think it's... I mean, I'd actually just, like, completely disagree. I think it's a really fucking important part of the conversation. I think that... Remember last episode we were talking about Trident? You don't get to stop listening, man. Yeah? No matter how good what you do is, you have to keep up. Because there are people...
That's a different point, though, from the one you just made. And I agree with that. I agree with this point.
Well, from what point that I made?
Should old bands keep up? Or should people whose values are rooted in an older sense of the music keep up? Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think it would be... I was initially pretty anti-Migla. I had to pay attention. You hear a band having that kind of impact, you have to take it seriously.
Yeah.
I think that's a fine point. I think that's a somewhat different point from should bands know where their music is coming from or not. I think that's... Like, one's looking forward, one's looking back. Like, should we care about Migla? Sure, yes. And I think it probably would be possible to make authentic underground black metal that's influenced by Migla. Your boys, you really like Plaga, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of, you take Plaga and make the production a little bit more buzzy. Mm-hmm. And that's a really stompy, ignorant underground BM band that's profoundly influenced by Migla.
Yeah. Well, I guess my issue is just like... Well, maybe not issue. It's very difficult to talk about stuff like this, but we can't... You got to incorporate the technology, Like, you don't have to. I mean, if you just want to fucking do your thing, if you just want to, recreate certain stuff, that's fine. But ultimately, even if you don't like it, even if you think it's inauthentic, there's technology being developed. There's this whole world of these sort of internal ideas being developed in bands like this that has to be noticed. Because if you don't notice it, 5 years are going to pass by and you're going to have no fucking idea what you're doing. Does that make any sense? Like...
Sort of. I mean, I see this as on a different... I mean, this is part of a different developmental process than black metal, I think. Like, black metal is doing really well right now, I think, with all the bands we're hearing on the show, who are, in some sense, productively listening to older stuff and hearing very different things in it. I think as far as an analog to the Migla core, I mean, God, you could think of the chiming arpeggios in the New Serpent column as from within... that guy also has a background in post-hardcore, right? He understands that music back to front. So there's someone making kind of, not at all copying Migla, but making, and not influenced by it as far as I know or can tell, but like making aggressive music, aggressive black metal that's influenced by the sense of melody in Horna and Druk and Angel Corpse, and also responsive to Migla. Like on Katotos in particular, there are these, flowing, chiming arpeggio things that, like, could be hyper sped up Migla riffs.
Well, I mean,
that's responsive to it, and I think that's a valid response. I mean, that sounds very modern, it's extremely contemporary music.
Right? Yeah, I mean, it's, I don't know, I guess that's maybe a point of diversion is I think that you are, not to like put words in your mouth, I think you are more focused on the idea of black metal as tradition than I am. Because for me there's something about this record that appeals to me, which is this sort of like merciless discounting of the past, it's aggravating. I understand that. Like, it almost like bothers me too, but it's not that far in my mind from what Mayhem does on Grand Declaration of War. That's a totally callous discounting of black metal history.
Doesn't it, doesn't it not, though? I mean, isn't it filled with, good black metal riffs and, stuff that sounds like Voivod?
Yeah, it's full of
Killing Joke. It sounds like they listen to music. I don't think this band listens to music.
Jesus Christ.
No, I'm serious. Like, I think this is style. I think this band is groping its way towards an idea of music by the things they're imitating.
Well, it's Grand Declaration of War is
again, I like a lot of those post-hardcore headed to black metal bands, but, there's like, I mean, God, even if this sounded like... there's just... I don't know whether I disagree with your broader point that there's something productive about incorporating Migla and post-hardcore into black metal. I just... and I don't see this band as the most egregious example of it being bad. I think if anything's kind of annoying to me, if anything's getting my goat personally about this, it's the way it's sort of, maybe like working... I'm not going to attempt to articulate that now. I've heard better versions of this idea, right? Vigadude is a better version of this same idea.
I gotcha. All right.
It's like, I think, I guess to my answer to that question is like, I'm going to answer that question with this thread on the comments below this record.
Yeah.
Euronymous comments, working on my solo project, quote, Feast of Casket at the moment, which is my first single. Arlen Wright comments under it, wow, did you make this true cult name up for yourself for your band? Euronymous comments, Feast or Casket, you mean? I just randomly thought about that. Arlen Wright comments, no, of course not. I am talking about the name of the drummer of Mayhem. Euronymous writes, Hellhammer, you mean? Arlen Wright writes, of course. Euronymous writes, he's the guitarist, not the drummer. Arlen Wright writes, yeah, you're using his name.
What?
Yeah, so that's what we're dealing with. Like, it's once you hear it, it's not so funny, huh? The kids, it's like, I mean, like, it's... Yeah, I mean, that's just depressing to me.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, Arlen Wright could be on some extreme high-level trolling. But if it's extreme high-level trolling, it works because it's too real.
I kind of love it. I kind of love it. Honestly, well, I think we've kind of covered this. We've covered this pretty well, and I'm pretty sure this is a whole thing we'll be revisiting in the future, probably.
Oh God! Well, of course, the Migla Wars will never end.
Oh no, man! No more Migla Wars. And so, I mean, what? Well, fuck it. I'll give this one to you. What should we end on?
What? A devoid of light. Just kidding.
Fuck.
Let's see. Did I have an idea for this show? Oh. Yeah. Okay. So this is a band that's been doing really well this year. And it started late last year. It's called Gloosh. And I kind of wanted to review them earlier this year. This is Slavic black metal by a Russian. He says his huge influences are Drudk and Wolves in the Throne Room. Mm-hmm. Maybe Wolves in the Throne Room kind of influences the thematics. He's got this very nature-y kind of thing, but for him it's really shamanic and Siberian, which is cool. And people will call it post-black, and it kind of... it scratches that itch, I think. Like, people, the kids who like post-black will like Gloosh. But he really understands Romansenko guitar technique inside out, more than many bands that are deliberately trying to clone Drudk, more than many other bands. And I'm sort of impressed by it. I'm going to have to find one real quick. Should we go for one that sounds more Drudky or one that is just massively sentimental and very post-rocky? Or not very post-rocky, but very, like, satisfying in that kind of poppy way.
Yeah, let's go for Satisfaction.
All right, so we're going to... Oh, and this will fit, too. This is their second-to-last track, Groza, Track 5 off of I'm sure that means the same thing in Russian as it does, or in Russian as it does in Polish.
Probably.
This is off of the record Timewheel, which came out late last year. I'd say this is kind of the climax moment of the album. There's a lot of just really strong black metal riffing throughout. But here's your big sing-along off the end of this record. I think it's fantastic. You should totally support this guy.
All right, let's check that out. And thanks for listening to us talk shit for the past hour.
Yeah, thanks for sitting through that one. All right,
through pure autism. Take it easy. We'll see you next week.